What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dumb Bro podcast. I have a very mysterious man on it's showing up on my right. I don't know how it's going to show up for you guys, who I'm going to introduce in a second. And we are going to be talking about the Xinjiang topic today. It's the hot topic that a lot of people are talking about, a lot of people are misinformed on, and something that the both of us have spent a considerable amount of time researching and looking at. So before we jump into this, how about you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Daniel, and thanks for this topic that really needs to be talked about a hell of a lot more. I am Bay Area 415. I am a YouTube personality, I guess you can say. Latino lawyer from the Bay Area and whatnot, really trying to drum up some more attention towards the misinformation that's being spread about China, but specifically other countries as well that really get an unfair shake among Americans, and really trying to beat back these kinds of narratives that are not fair and just really dangerous, to be honest. I mean, we'll get into that more and how dangerous this is and whatnot. But
Yes.
yeah, it's just been something that I've been really passionate about ever since I was a kid, to be honest. And growing up in the Bay Area, and working out here now and trying to help these communities out here, really do really does give a lot of more meaning to what we are doing in our own communities and in our own backyards as well. So really happy that I'm able to do this, and really happy that there's a lot of people that are really dedicated to finding the truth about this. I'm really surprised how fast the channel has grown on my end, and seeing how your channel has grown as well. It's been fantastic, and I have so many people to thank. But ultimately, yeah, that's a little snippet of my background. So
Now, the thing you talked about just now, you spoke about just now, the danger of doing this. Is that why your face is covered?
most likely, I mean, I am an attorney. I work at a big firm and whatnot, but it's more about family and friends. I've talked to so many people from my political background and my, racial, cultural background and whatnot. And people like me are often targeted when we speak out on issues like this. I know so many uh, comrades of mine really get harassed by police, get doxxed by Nazis and neo-Nazis and whatnot. They get harassed and things of that sort. It's not fun.
Yeah.
And it's really something. I have to say that it's nothing. I obviously am willing, ready, and able to risk, my career and whatnot. I'm not really concerned about that. The more concerned thing that I'm about is being passionate about what is going on here. However, I know the dangers that I'm putting my families and other at risk if this is
I
revealed.
think
And
I think yeah. People really don't appreciate and how ironic it is too. These people who are talking about free speech and freedom and people being oppressed, but this is a common story over and over again. And it's not just you
yep,
from your ethnic background. You look at like the most simple thing that LeBron James said, that I think we're
yep,
uninformed on the situation in Hong
oh,
Kong, which was the understatement of the century, and how he
yep,
was targeted for that. I know somebody else in Australia who has a Chinese tea shop. They are not Chinese themselves, but they're pushing back on this propaganda. She
yep.
had her shop targeted by officials now. Her shop was
I mean,
shut down. And then there's another guy I know who had a really good rebuttal to one of the Xinjiang stories. And there was a guy that started following him around and sending him messages, hacked his computer, knew like all kinds of stuff about him, and he slipped up on one piece of information. So he actually managed to get the police to help him, and the guy's been arrested.
wow, wow.
Um,
And
and then
that,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say that's really something that we are also wary about, especially people of color. We don't immediately go to the police for obvious reasons, because sometimes they are the antagonizers as well. When I look, I always say I am more than willing to do a face reveal when I am somewhere in China, more than doing somewhere over here.
you know
So
what?
I'm not.
That's yeah. You said it exactly. Like for this stuff, when I was speaking up about it, if I wasn't living in China, I wouldn't be pushing back on it. And that's the ironic thing is people say, oh, you have to say this because you're in China. It's like, no, I can only say this because I'm in China. And yeah. And I remember like just the other day I used to never block anybody on Twitter, but some of it started getting really, there was one guy from, it's a Russian guy living in Hong Kong supporting the Hong Kong protests. He posted a picture of my kids on Twitter and says, how is your kids? God bless your family.
Jeez,
And it's like these
wow.
people are, it's but in China, luckily I feel safe. But I definitely would not be doing this if I lived outside of China. It's completely upside down from what people assume, and it's pretty crazy,
Of
isn't it?
course, and you also touched another thing too, especially with we are also targets not only of the right side of things, but also sometimes the left side. Western leftists have also been really kind of demanding that we all admit that China is not socialist and China is not following the proper path and whatnot. They're capitalists. They're doing all this, and I did. You can see through my videos. I read an entire textbook on this stuff, and I can
Yeah,
firmly say that yeah, there's a lot more you're missing, buddy. But at the same time, this is why I also wear the mask. I'm not in it for the fame. I'm not in it for. I don't want to be a leader of any of this. I really am more dedicated to talking about the truth, spreading the word about this stuff. And I really don't want any ego behind this either. So, and when you start playing with identity stuff and whatnot, then it starts to get a little cloudy and muddy. It's like, oh, well, he did this when he was 5 years old, blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
And obviously, don't get me wrong. I really do think that it's important to look into people and whatnot, but the messages can really get distorted if we really start to um, lose our vision and focus more on the person rather than the messages that person is saying. And I think this really helps with that as well.
Yeah, and I guess for me, the one of the things that really pushes me and motivates me is because this what's going on has all of the warning signs that we had before when we were lied to about things that happened throughout the world, and there were things to excuse conflicts, which led to killing millions of innocent people. And it seems like nobody's learning from those instances. They're just going along with it again. That we had the perfect opportunity to say, hold on a second. When it comes to accusations like this, where there's a geopolitical motive or element involved, we need a little bit more information than this. But people are just falling in line, and they're just going along with it. I want to actually I don't know if this is going to work. I want to play a couple of short clips from my pinned tweets right now that explains a little bit about it, and we can hear from some of the people who were speaking up against this last time when nobody listened last time
Absolutely.
either. Okay, let me see if this
Absolutely.
works. Let's see here.
Perfect.
So this is a speech in 1999.
You trust their stories? You remember the 500 premature babies that the Iraqis supposedly ripped from incubators in Kuwait, laughingly throwing the babies down on the hospital floors? Vivid, detailed descriptions, even names of some of the poor victims whose little premature baby was in there. It turned out the story was a total fabrication. 500 premature babies in incubators? It turns out in all of LA County, there's not more than 50 incubators. Half of them are not being used at any one time. Did Kuwait specialize in premature births? The San Francisco Chronicle had a headline that said, rape, just 2 weeks ago, rape is an official Serb policy, Kosovo refugees say. Oh, they know about official policy. And you read down 2 columns, and finally you get the OSCE official says the rapes have only numbered in very few dozens of rapes. That's not an official policy. Oh, if Bill Clinton is looking to stop very few dozens of rapes, well, that's a slow 2 months in Washington, D.C. He could start much closer to home. He could concentrate on Capitol Hill, as a matter of fact, or even closer.
Yeah.
It's so touching to see our leaders finally concerned about rape. It is so touching. But it's so odd that they've got to look so far away to go fight this crime. go forth and rape. A Bosnian Serb commander was quoted throughout our media as saying an official policy. And the Bosnian Serb army, which numbers only about 30,000 men, numbered then, was accused of having raped from 25 to 100,000 Muslim women. Again, we should have said, wait a minute, what's going on here? What are these stories about? The Serb commander's name was never found. They traced it back to Rooser Finn, right? That special PR group that was so happy and boasts about how it has convinced much of the progressive community in America that there's genocide and ethnic cleansing and mass rape and all of this is going on. And when they were questioned about the unverifiable, unconfirmed nature of the reports, they said, our goal is public relations. We're not here to get confirmation. And we achieved our goal.
Yeah.
They
I
sure
mean,
did. They sure did. Oh, Michael Parenti will always have a special place in my heart, Daniel. I mean, he speaks truth. I mean, back to the '80s. So it's really enlightening to hear him say
yeah.
that.
Yeah. And then so that thread, I'll post a link in our video, but it goes on to talk about the specific lie about from the famous nurse, the Kuwaiti
Mm-hmm.
nurse.
Mm-hmm.
We I also post about Pierce Robinson talking about how the propaganda worked for the weapons of mass destruction. And I also put a video here of, I'm sure you've seen this one, of Ron Paul questioning about what really happened in 9/11. What's happening with their foreign policy where they're creating these kinds of aggressions. I show how Phil Donahue was taken off of the air. That was what is now, leftist media. He was taken off of the air for questioning the WMD and being too anti-war. And it's just, there's a bunch of stuff in here where I just provide evidence where over and over and over again, this is what happens. This is what they do.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, Daniel. The entire reason why I actually got involved with learning about China and whatnot was because of actually Venezuela. When I was studying what happened in Venezuela, the protests, the fight for democracy, and everything else, everybody, at least in the leftist communities online, was like up in arms and calling BS. And I was really happy that they were. I created so many long posts and essays writing, calling them out. And then when all of a sudden, when Hong Kong happened, I was like, well, here we go again. But surprisingly, not a lot of leftists joined. And I was like, hey, you guys, it's literally the same playbook here. It's literally, fight for freedom and democracy. China's an enemy of the state because they're a socialist government and everything like that. And it just has the same routine playbook and whatnot, and nobody was following it. But that's why I decided to dig deeper and just call out that BS. I mean, this is typical CIA, State Department BS. NED, NGOs. We're probably going to talk all about that in a little bit.
The divide and conquer. I mean, just speaking of Venezuela, just next door, also in South America, my mother's country of Guyana, same kind of a thing. Chetty Jagam was elected by the people, and he was he had Marxist-Leninist leaning kind of philosophies. He was a bit too friendly with the Soviet, and the U.S. didn't want another Cuba situation in the region, so they went in and created a racial ethnic war between the people of Indian and African descent. And when I saw the stuff going in Hong Kong, and you saw the people like Jimmy Lai and what kinds of people he was connected to in the U.S. government, and the years of xenophobic content that he was posting against mainlanders leading up to the events in Hong Kong, it was, again, like you said, it's the same playbook over and over again. With Xinjiang, there's a video of the former chief of staff to the United States Secretary Colin Powell. He's also a retired Army colonel, Lawrence B. Wilkerson, saying that they are positioning themselves in Afghanistan close to China and using the Uyghurs as a way to create conflicts in China and to create ethnic conflicts between them and the Han is something that they will do, something that they will obviously rely on.
It's typical balkanization stuff. It really is trying to split up. Now they had a lot more pieces on Mongolia, and it's almost like clockwork. The first Mongolia, or first Hong Kong, then Taiwan, or Taiwan's always been there, but Taiwan, then Tibet has always been there as well, and then Xinjiang, and then Mongolia. I mean, now they're just trying this balkanization stuff. I've been seeing popular posts on Reddit and other online communities circulating this map of how China may be when broken up, and we're like, no, 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 we're not going back to that age of humiliation again. We're not
Yeah.
doing that.
Did you see the person that I exposed to my Twitter who she was somebody from Mongolia constantly saying, "Oh, you're a CCP shill. Show us your financial records and all this kind of stuff," and she was like pretending to be this person who cared about people in China and Uyghurs and stuff like that. And she keeps saying I'm affiliated with the Chinese government, which I'm not. And then finally, I found out what she changed her Twitter profile from. I looked her up. She's working for the World Uyghur Congress, the CIA's National Endowment for Democracy funded organization.
And I'll tell you this, Daniel. I actually exposed something, a bigger scam. Not a bigger scam, but I noticed that there was a lot of shady stuff that's been going around with these narratives. And I'm not gonna say, or this disproves everybody that has a story about their governments and whatnot. However, I remember when I was on Reddit and there were some people saying, "Oh, here's an AMA about how I'm starving in Venezuela. Look how skinny I am, and look at my kitchen and how empty it is." And I was like, huh, this is interesting. And then I found out that they have a Bitcoin wallet, below their description. I was like, huh, they're really, asking a lot of people are giving. They're getting several tens of thousands of views and whatnot. But then I look into their profile and I Googled their username. They've been doing this scam for like 10, 20 times and just collecting money from people that are just saying, oh, look, they recycle the same script. They recycle the same pictures. They recycle everything just to get the Bitcoins and just to scam people. I'm like, yo, this isn't even about politics anymore. This is more about just conning people. Like they had separate usernames showing off their tech that they bought from people and everything. I was like, come on, y'all. I mean,
Yeah,
even I have to say that shady stuff. Like I said, I'm not saying that everything happens like that, and maybe there are some grievances as well. But
yeah, I know they were legitimately using Bitcoin in Venezuela because of the hyperinflation. And even if that story was true and they weren't going overboard and scamming like that, these people are suffering from sanctions that have been put on their country from outside. And there was even the point where there was a Mexican company that was sanctioned for sending drinking water because there was a water crisis. They were sanctioned for sending drinking water to people. And that's what these sanctions are designed to do. It's the same thing. It's the same thing in Xinjiang. I shared a video yesterday where before China was dealing with this BS about forced labor and stuff like that in Xinjiang, they had this beautifully filmed documentary about trying to convince young Uyghur women to not just, marry and stay at home and just stay on the farm and live in poverty. And they convinced them to go to factories around the country, like in Anhui province and all these different places. And it was a really touching story because you could see these girls, they really wanted to go, but their parents were so traditional. They're like, no, they need to take care of us. They need their places in the home. And so this is before China had any incentive to make documentaries like this. They were just showing some of these programs they were doing. And now when factories in Xinjiang or factories who are hiring Uyghur workers are being sanctioned, and I've heard from people in Hong Kong from trading companies who said, I've dealt with this factory that's being sanctioned. Those are regular workers making a regular salary. This is such BS. It's deliberate.
Right.
It's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Obviously.
It's create suffering and then get them to rise up against their government. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to probably touch upon this a little later, but yeah, I've seen the diplomatic spokesperson talked about these BS sanctions that the United States has imposed on Xinjiang and companies that have employed Uyghurs and whatnot because of slave labor and everything else like that, and it's just completely unfounded. I talked about this with the John Oliver debunked video that's showing all this footage. Literally, people are clapping and they have houses lined up ready to go. I mean, I know that there's a couple of people here that would love houses like that if they just did a 9 to 5, and at
Yeah,
the same time, oh man, it's just like
you did a good review. Yeah, you did a good review on the poverty alleviation stuff that they were
yeah,
doing. And
yeah.
now PBS also did a poverty alleviation video on China, and it was removed from the air in the U.S. for being too pro Beijing.
Surprise.
Pro Beijing? All it was doing was showing people being lifted out of poverty, and that was too offensive to be shown
Censorship,
in the U.S.
censorship in the land of the
A-
free.
and and there was the other guy who recently went to tour the poverty alleviation stuff, and the thing that he was harping on was he saw pictures of Xi Jinping on the wall. They said, "Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, they're being lifted out of poverty, they're being given free houses, but there's a hidden agenda. Look, there's Xi Jinping's picture on the wall." And I was
I
like,
remember. I was going to say, not to interrupt, but I remember there was actually this Michael Moore video. Not that I like Michael Moore too much and everything, but he did this bit where um, they were selling gas for under $1 to Americans, and they were saying, "Hey, this is actually going to Saddam, even though there's sanctions. We have an organization. Are you okay with this?" And Americans were like, "Yeah, of course I am. I don't care. I'm getting free gas." Blah blah blah. It's like, oh, and they sold out within the hour as well. It's just
but
amazing,
yeah. Yeah, I mean
you know.
the people here. I mean, it's a culture that people don't really understand too on the outside. I remember when I was in Tibet and I was interviewing the herdsmen. Nobody told them to do this. They said, "Oh, wait," and they went to get one of their pins, which was on their other jacket, and it was a pin of Mao Zedong, this Tibetan guy. And I said to him,
Wow,
I
proud.
knew, yeah, he was proud, and you could see the way he was talking to me and everything like that. But I knew
Mhm.
how Western audiences would see that. And I asked him, and I felt kind of embarrassed to do that because this was something he was proud of. But I just
Yeah,
said to him, I said, "You know what? Do you mind actually maybe don't put it on because
sure,
it's going to distract, and that's all people are going to
sure.
focus on." But yeah, that was a
I
weird
mean,
thing with the
and this is the frustrating thing about it as well. Like, I know a lot of Westerners may hear that and they say, "Oh no, he was trying to put it on to protect himself because the government's watching him and everything." And it's like, no, dude.
yeah.
Believe it or not, there are people that genuinely like their country for what they are
and and
providing,
and
and
and they're yeah, and they're doing really well too. One thing I didn't
yeah,
notice was his daughter when she was milking the goats and tending to them and stuff like that. And I didn't notice she had this. Everybody in the video was pointing out she had this thick 24-karat bracelet on her. And these are herdsmen
wow,
who are doing really,
wow,
really well. And the government, same
wow.
kind of a thing, poverty alleviation program. They connect them with buyers. They don't take any commission when they're doing that. They help them get their product on the internet and stuff like that. I mean, it was remarkable. But you
I
know
mean,
what? Yes, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Do you want to? Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to, watching your videos in Tibet, I would love to talk about Tibet, especially when you visited that noble's house and talk about how the caste system worked down there, and also the children and how they're getting an education. Like your tour guide not being able to do what he does now if they were still stuck in the feudal system. Like this was more about liberation and moving people up. But unfortunately, there's this ongoing, it's like opposite land. Like they're promoting cultures. I mean, you've seen these cultural shows and celebrations and everything. They were absolutely beautiful. Women getting uplifted, getting an education and scholarships. But still, it's opposite here. There's cultural suppression. There's no mobility for these people. They're forced to learn the Mandarin language, and it's
We had,
like,
we had we had we had residential schools in Canada which were specifically designed to train their culture out of them. I mean,
yes,
and
I have a
the
personal story with that. I mean, my first language was Spanish. I only knew Spanish up until 3 or 4, and I could not enter kindergarten because I spoke too much Spanish. So I had to go to a English preschool program to learn a little bit more English, and it was just, it is
in
toxic
in in
when
in in a in a territory that was annexed by the US also from Mexico to begin with.
the ironic brutality of imperialism is just
and, and,
staring
and, and
blank at it.
Yeah, when I did the school visit, and
Mm,
I found out that Han Chinese going there need to learn Tibetan also. I put one of the girls on the spot. She explained a science experiment in Mandarin, and I got her. Even though they don't learn science in Tibetan, that's one the topic they
mm,
learn in Mandarin. I got
sure.
her to explain the science experiment in Tibetan, and she was able to do it. She said, "Okay, yeah,
Wow.
sure."
Wow.
And there were people who legitimately thought that all of those kids who knew how to write Tibetan calligraphy, who knew how to type Tibetan in the computer, who knew how to play Tibetan instruments, who knew how to sing Tibetan songs, who knew how to dance Tibetan dance, that it was all a show and they learned it just for me.
Wow.
They just learn it just for
Wow.
yeah, yeah. They
Wow.
know they're being taught Tibetan just in case somebody like me shows up. It's like, well,
Yeah, yeah, it's all a show. Don't you understand?
yeah, well,
it's all
yeah.
propped up for you, you know?
If they want to really believe that, well, then aren't they still learning Tibetan in the meanwhile?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
like
mean, they had to spend a couple months learning that, you know, but it's all for show, Daniel. Don't look too far into it. That's what they expect you to do, because you know, with that and the mosques in Xinjiang that are like in the thousands, tens of thousands, it's all for show. You know, it's
yeah,
nothing.
no, it really was.
Uh,
It really is remarkable to see the how much people want to believe what they're believing. But you know what? Let's
yeah.
we've got a lot of stuff to go through, and you put a
I
really
know, I
nice
know.
outline together with. I gave you a bunch of resources from my research. You combined it with yours. So how about you take the lead a little bit here, and we start going through some of the topics that we want to cover, or is the questions you want to ask, or that we want to talk about together.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I think the first and foremost, the biggest thing that we really do have to tackle is just the narrative itself and how they approach this narrative, these experts and whatnot, whether they are people like Adrian Zenz, who believes they are on a mission by God to destroy China, yeah, Human Rights Watch, World Uyghur Congress, and other NGOs that are just facades for the State Department and NED and whatnot. Um, I'm blanking on her name.
Rushan
Abbas.
Abbas. Yeah.
Yes, Roshan Abbas. She was exposed big time on Reddit for just being another CIA shill, basically, and trying to say, "Oh no, I'm here to protect the Uyghurs. I'm an activist." It's like, no, BS.
And
And I
you know
was
what?
super happy.
It's way worse than that. She
Yeah,
worked with the CIA in Guantanamo Bay, overseeing
torture,
Uyghur
torture.
prisoners. Yeah,
Ah,
I mean, and then when she was exposed, she didn't continue with her AMA because all of the questions were about what was it like working for the CIA. But then
yeah,
recently she
yeah.
came out on Twitter and she says, "Oh, Guantanamo Bay is better than Xinjiang, and I'm not ashamed of
Oh
working in."
wow.
And it's like, yeah, yeah, I hear
Yeah.
that it's like a vacation. They've got water sports and everything, don't they? It's
Bravo, bravo. I mean, seriously, they live. These experts, when you really strip them down, are nothing but paid actors, and they're paid actors with the background taught by the State Department and whatnot to push this sort of agenda that is just extremely unfair. We obviously know what the agenda is. It's
yeah,
to it's the possibility of breaking up China with the trade wars, making them economically crippled and whatnot. Because I always say it's amazing that they are able to rally 1.4 billion people out of poverty while we are trying to restrict immigrants from coming in, and we still have 40% of our population at the poverty line or below. You know, $400 is a life or death situation for people that they can't even afford in
mm.
this country. Yet we're
and
telling other.
yeah, yeah, and blocking any documentaries about China's poverty alleviation in the meantime. Don't look over there when when we're doing this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just keep living in your cars, keep living in the homeless situations. I mean, in California, it's all over the place, and it's really frustrating that we have empty houses here, but we can't give them to them because that's how the economy is. Whereas China is literally building houses like there's no other business, and giving them to these people so they can actively work. Like it's so smart on how to stimulate an economy when you don't have to worry about basic necessities. You can actually move on to have a productive life. We can actually help build an economy when I don't have to worry where my water is coming from. It's basic stuff like that that I am just utterly impressed with China. And obviously, we are keeping it secret for a reason. But at the same time, I am glad that people are starting to wake up to that. But with all that said, yeah, people like Rashan Abbas, they're really uh, they're really starting to be called out. And along with the NGOs and all this narrative with Adrian Zenz, NGOs, Rashan Abbas, the first person interviews, and oh yeah, this person in yellow face that was exposed
Yeah,
to
Brian Kern or whatever it was.
yeah. I know this is more on the Hong Kong issue, but I mean, this is just again not surprising that they're continuing these narratives to promote themselves and become successful behind a facade of lies. But it's okay because the Western narrative is supporting them, and they get thousands of dollars just regurgitating this nonsense. And
Yeah. And the other thing too is though people need to ask themselves, because there's no short, like, you've done it, I've done it. How many people need to be exposed as lying about this story before people start asking the question? I mean, of course, they can keep throwing stories at us faster than they can be debunked. That's not the hard thing to do, is to just come up with a random story. But after a certain number of people are exposed that they're actually working for the CIA, or one of the main people turns I forget her name, in Adrian Zenz's most recent sterilization story.
I know of her.
She changed her story within 6 months. Like within 6 months, she says, "Oh no, it was just mental abuse." And then later, it turned into, "Oh, I was kicked in the stomach until I was bleeding and can't have babies anymore." It's like that's a pretty big change in story in 6 months. Or Uyghur activists online whose age of their family keeps changing every time they talk about them.
I mean,
Or
you did the interview, Daniel, with Arslan, the Uyghur activist, who basically has a whole bunch of circumstantial evidence and just nothing actually pointing to the oppression. But I was going to say, too, I applaud your very patient demeanor when you were interviewing him, because I would have been like a tiger ready to pounce when it came to his BS, especially when it came to like the fast tracking of organs, because I seen it at an airport. It's like, really, you see it? I seen a Cinnabon at an airport. Does that mean like there's a Cinnabon slavery crisis somewhere in the United States? I mean, come on.
Like, I mean, I didn't want to act too aggressive because I wanted him to just say what he felt. And that's actually something I learned from Max Blumenthal when I interviewed him, because when he was at the World Uyghur Congress, and he asked Omar Kanat, he said, so the media gets this number of 1 million Uyghurs in camps from you. And he's like, yeah. And he says, and then later on, he's like, well, where do you get it from? And he's like, the media, and then it's like this endless loop.
Logic.
And then so I asked, when I interviewed Max Blumenthal, I asked him, I said, how do you keep your cool? Like, how do you, and he says, it's just something he does because, you let people say what they want to say, and they're kind of expose themselves. And with Arslan, the guy that I interviewed, all of his sources were Radio Free Asia, CIA propaganda outlets. He believes that there's a $1.8 billion per year industry for shaving Uyghur women's hair off, which if you took how many billions, how many millions of tons or whatever it was of hair, it would mean that the Uyghur women's hair are being sold for $8,000 a piece, which is like, wow, their hair is worth a lot of money. And when their hair is shaved off, they have to put their head through a hole to get it shaved because there's no barber chairs in China. And I mean, he admitted in the interview too that he downloads random videos off of Douyin and puts captions on them like Uyghur child separated from his parents. And to this day, even after the interview, when I called him out on it, it's still up. He hasn't put a retraction. He hasn't clarified saying, sorry guys, I made this up. It's still there, and people still believe it. People are still retweeting it.
It's just we found out so many pictures of like the Uyghur prisoners that happen to be a pyramid scheme, or like the other. The biggest thing was that drone footage that CNN and BBC were constantly showing about a prisoner transfer. No authentication, Nothing was given, but it's literally on mainstream news channels saying this is apparently a Uyghur because an employee from Amnesty International or a NGO that's funded told us so. What do
Yeah.
you say about that? And I really respect what the Chinese ambassador said in the BBC interview, actually. He was like, "Oh, are you kidding me? We don't know anything from this. You guys are just reiterating where you got this from somebody that is obviously biased. It's astounding, you know."
Yeah, no, yeah, and like people just jump to conclusions. Like it's like, I mean, even if you want to believe that that is a prison, and it looks like a prison, it is a prison.
Right.
There
Right.
are prisons everywhere, and there was
Yeah.
there was a legitimate major terrorism problem. There's
Right.
videos of people being blown to bits, being chopped up with knives. Uh,
Right.
um, religious leaders from mosques having their heads cut off.
Right.
There's gonna be prisons now. In terms
No,
of
but
saying,
Daniel, you got to understand here. You got to bomb the countries though, and create a media campaign against the minorities, so you can feel better about yourselves. That's what the Americans did with September 11th, the terrorist attack. So we had to follow their lead. But what China did was, a very peaceful way of trying to avoid terrorism by giving them jobs, by giving them opportunities. And it baffles me that since 2000, I think it was since 2017, that one person died from a terrorist attack since. And
yeah.
we're still wondering why we had to spend $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion abroad, bombing innocent people, costing hundreds and thousands of lives, when China kind of gave the solution right then and there. I mean, obviously, upping security was important, and facial recognition's obviously a controversy as well. But I'm looking at the results here, and they are stunning. I remember there was this guy. I think he's a rapper on YouTube, Nunez or something like that. He's Canadian too, I think. He was walking about Xinjiang and he noticed these things as well. But also, it's like this is a vibrant city. This is a normal, vibrant city that tourists can really enjoy. And I'm really hoping that I can do that someday when all this Corona stuff dies down. But we'll see.
Yeah, in regards to how America deals with it, I think this is a really good time to play one video here.
Sure.
Hold on one second, and we'll see how does America deal with these, and when they acknowledge that there is an issue.
Over the past weekend, United States forces conducted air operations to strike Taliban and East Turkistan Islamic Movement, or ETIM, training facilities in Badakhshan province. The destruction of these training facilities prevent terrorists from planning any acts near the border with China and Tajikistan. The strikes also destroyed stolen Afghan National Army vehicles and the process of being converted to vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices. One brief note on ETIM, which I just mentioned. They are a terrorist organization that operates in China and the border regions of Afghanistan. ETIM enjoys support from the Taliban in the mountains of Badakhshan. So hitting these Taliban training facilities and squeezing the Taliban support networks degrades ETIM capabilities. What I'd like to do is show you a couple videos of strikes in this area in Badakhshan. The first one that you're going to see is a B-52 strike on a Taliban training camp in Badakhshan. Adrian, can you please roll the tape? This strike occurred on 4 February.
That's how they re-educate.
And this is in China's borders as well.
No. This one was outside. These were Uyghur fighters that were training with the Taliban. In this one should be Afghanistan. So no, they definitely wouldn't. They wouldn't do that within China's borders.
I was going to say, because when I heard China bordered and everything like that, I was like, are they seriously doing this? I mean, hopefully it's a joint exercise or something.
They wait till they cross over, and then they
Mm.
take care of them. They take care of the Muslims like they usually do, American style.
Right.
No re-education programs, none of this. And you got to ask yourself, there was what was it? It was like 30,000 Uyghurs confirmed fighting in Syria with ISIS. When they return home, what are you supposed to do with them? What are you supposed to do with them?
I swear, I wish I found this article. It was in this big database that I linked to my video, the John Oliver video. But they were actually saying that the CIA was involved with trying to trying to help Uyghur terrorists come in and out of China to basically cause disruption, disorder, and everything like that. Not that I know whether that's legitimate or not, but again, doesn't surprise me.
I mean, it's
If it
exactly what
is.
they did in Tibet. It's exactly what they
Yeah,
did in Tibet. They spent
yeah,
$1.7 million a year, 500,000 of that, which was for training camps to radicalize Tibetans. And that's long enough ago where it's all declassified, and you'll see the same thing. You'll see the same thing come out saying, "Oh, it turns out we were doing this," but it's going to be long enough later where nobody really cares anymore.
this video was actually done in 2018 too, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's like it's 2 years ago, and seemingly everybody loves to forget about that, and how dangerous a situation was in
Yeah.
Xinjiang. But again, it's the double think, short term memory that the Westerners are really compassionate about. But again, it really does backfire. It does
Yeah,
blow back in the
what they're
face.
doing is they're conflating. They're taking all of these things that they're denying that there's a legitimate terrorism issue. Then they're inflating the numbers of how many people are actually going through a mandatory kind of re-education, and also
Mhm.
mixing in people who are going through optional vocational training. Like these people, they go home on the weekends and stuff like that. They're being trained
Right,
for to go into the workforce and have better jobs
right.
and stuff like that. And they're mixing it all in together and confusing people to say, "Oh, this is what's going on." And
And that's the most frustrating sort of narrative. And I really want to say also as well, coming from your interview with Arslan, uh, it's really sort of scary what they are trying to advocate for an independent East Turkestan or Turkestan, right? I
mhm,
think it's called.
yeah,
And it's when you really actually talk about how would you structure the society, um, it because when Arslan said that he's in the minority and he wants a liberal democracy, it's like, well, what does the majority want? Does the majority want to oppress women? What are your feelings about those people that are already living there? There's a lot of Han Chinese people living over there as well. How are you gonna force them out or move them out? What are your views about abortion? Because obviously abortion is still legal, let alone birth control. And we're gonna talk about that bit in a little as well, because I know the West has been taking birth control as sterilization hypocritically, when we just discovered that they've been actually doing forced sterilizations for immigrant women at the border.
legitimate
It,
sterilizations.
legit. It's mind-boggling how they project what they want to hide to their enemies. And when in reality, and the most frustrating thing is, China does not have to be an enemy, and we can learn so much from each other if we actually collaborate on these things. But that's for another episode, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're not even allowed to learn about poverty alleviation from them,
No,
as we can see from
no.
the banned PBS documentary. Um, but yeah, no, that was it is pretty frustrating. Let's see what we've got on the list here that you've
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, so far we've been really trying to attack the sources here. I mean, we haven't even got to Adrian Zenz, who, like I said, is on a mission by God, who is opposing to homosexuality, thinks you can spank children, scripture spanking or whatever, and thinks that it's his God-given mission to take down the Chinese empire. And
Yeah, but and it's also important to note that he feels that the non-believers, non-Christians, will be raptured before God and will not be raptured, or I can't remember how he worded it. Basically, they're doomed.
what? Why
So
is this guy an expert?
he's saving the Muslims so that they can be doomed in comfort.
Really, really. I mean, you're doing this through faulty UN reports that only report from 8 people and extrapolate that times literally a million, and all of a sudden you become this independent researcher expert. Never mind the Victims of Communism Foundation, or being a senior fellow of that. Never mind the extreme right wing think tanks and ideology he stands with, and the theocratic, mind boggling sort of beliefs that he has. Sorry if I moved from the mic, but it's just really stunning how Adrian has gone so far in mainstream media without anybody checking his credentials. And this goes for Human Rights Watch, people like, I believe her, Sophia Richardson or whatever as well, who has who's been called out, is saying, do you even know Mandarin? Do you even know the language? How do you, get your funding? How do you actually interact with people if you yourself don't even know their language and how to talk with them?
Yeah,
And
the Victims of Communism Memorial Fund that he works for, they put Nazi deaths when the Soviets defeated them. They put Nazi deaths as numbers towards the victims of communism, and they tried to put COVID-19 deaths onto the list also.
oh my God,
If he was saying anything, if he was saying something that people didn't want to hear, they would very, very quickly say, "Why would we listen to a guy like this?"
yep,
Like,
yep.
look at what he says in his book. Look at how extreme this guy is. Why would we listen to anything he says? But he's saying something that people want to hear, so it's okay.
Agreed, and he's rehabilitated through that while burying his actual background. Like, same thing. But this is why I'm really happy that we live in an age of the internet, because people like him and Rashan Abbas can't just show up without actually being challenged anymore. Because it's obviously not going to be done by Wolf Blitzer or anybody else on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. It's going to be people that are actually calling them out on these platforms to say, hey, you really need an answer for your background on whether it's torturing people or believing in raptures or anything else, because it obviously affects how you're gathering this information. And it seems more like you're trying to push an agenda and push these statistics rather than actually trying to find out what is actually going on here.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
frustrating.
this stuff is really the thing is though people are doing it, and it's
Yeah,
in everybody's face, but nobody's really, well, I mean, I shouldn't say nobody's listening to it. The masses aren't listening to it though. They're not, like,
right.
this person was exposed as working with detained Uyghurs in Guantanamo Bay, and now you're going to listen to her. And now she has a new movie out about freeing the Uyghurs
Oh,
in Xinjiang, and it's
wow.
uh, like this stuff is in your face. And when you
Right.
point
I
it out
mean,
to these people, they still have a way of
it,
saying, yeah.
it's really amazing how propaganda is working like clockwork. Whereas, right down to Marvel and DC, where they want to make, Wonder Woman's new enemy Russia and things like that. Or like, I always remember this this moment in Thank You for Smoking, that movie where he's talking to the movie exec. It's like, Eastern European villain or Arab villain or everybody else. Those are the people who smoke, because smoking means bad, and that's the only way you can put it in. It's like these are now tropes. These are now
Yeah.
negative tropes that we really want to push on people without saying anything. But again, there's just been a lot of critical analysis on how Hollywood and culture and experts are now being challenged, because we really need the truth. We've seen the repercussions of not following the truth as Americans, and obviously who we victimize and what kind of blowback that brings. And
Yeah.
to take on someone like China, who has just been excelling. I mean, again, small tangent, but seeing this TikTok fiasco and just absolutely uh, blow up in front of Trump, that he's proud of just getting 12% of shares in American soil versus ByteDance, who literally says, "Okay, we're still majority shareholder and whatnot, and you're not going to stifle our innovation with these bully tactics either." And I'm actually doing a lot of research right now for my next video on this topic. But again, this all is in line with trying to stifle China's growth, China's unity, and China's development, because they have just been doing an awesome job with trying to respond to uh, their troubles in the beginning, but now have been developing over time. Again, there are problems. Obviously, not every government is perfect and whatnot, but especially looking at the Uyghur narrative and the exploitation that the West is really trying to show with that.
Yeah.
No one should really have faith in those types of narratives anymore.
No, yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
should be calling
and
them
on
out.
the Adrian Zenz item, I think this is a really good time to play one video where Max Blumenthal confronted him on his beliefs. I really like
Oh,
this video because it kind of,
beautiful.
yeah. Let's see here. Hold on one second. Let me add the stream.
I have a question for Adrian Zenz. Are you the author of Worthy, the same Adrian Zenz who authored Worthy to Escape? Why all believers will not be raptured before the tribulation?
All right,
And that's. I mean, I just wanted to confirm that before going further. Is that correct that you authored that book?
Oh, we are asking people to introduce themselves.
My name is Max Blumenthal.
Thank you. And then we'll take the next.
Well, my question, if you are the author of that book, is that you in that book call for spiritual spanking of children. You refer to gender equality as a satanic campaign. You speak out against hate crime legislation, and you speak out against tolerance thinking, blaming it on the leopard-like power behind the Antichrist. I was wondering how those views influence your work on China, a country that officially restricts apocalypticist evangelical religions like those expressed in that book.
Thank you for that question. As announced, we're taking 2 questions at a time, so we'll take the next question. I'm here as a private citizen. My name is Rebecca Venice, and I actually have a much simpler question, which is, as a private citizen, what acts can I take outside of letting my government know what I would like them to do? What can I do? Let Adrian go and then maybe.
Yes, thank you for this question. I do have a diverse background and I have personal convictions, which I do not believe are inconsistent with my research. I do not support China's authoritarian methods in any way, and I do believe that there's a God who is bringing judgment in different forms. It's a very complex topic, very fascinating topic, and I think very relevant. And I think it's good to live aware of that. Otherwise, I think it would be necessary to further contextualize your question, and I didn't fully understand how it was supposed to be related. Well, I think you implied an inconsistency with my research on China, which I personally do not see, but thank you in any case for your question.
This is the guy. This is the guy that people are relying on. And as I said, if he was saying anything other than what people wanted to hear, they'd be like, "Hold on a second, hold on a second, whoa,"
And it's so frustrating that Max is really the only reporter out there that is actually pushing these kind of questions. I mean, I'll always remember a little side note when Jose Ramos, the host of Univision, a very famous Spanish newscaster in the States, tries to interview Maduro with extremely bad faith questions, and Maduro just calls him out, and it ends up being a very embarrassing interview after everything. So these reporters, it really is up to reporters like Max and everybody else to challenge these narratives and really try to continue forward with pushing the envelope with challenging. Hey, you believe in this? Don't you think that's going to affect your research, or don't you think that's going to affect the narrative? Who's really paying you? Why are you not asking these more technical academic questions when analyzing this situation in this society? It's falling through the cracks with people, and there's nothing more heinous than to see how this million people prisoner figure has circulated over and over again, just because of his fake report, basically his faulty non-academic report that was just paid by the State Department through an NGO, and interviewing 8 people that is not academic or scientific whatsoever, and to do that is just fraudulent.
Yeah, I mean, all of these reports that are coming, anything to do with anti-China stuff, they just have to publish it. They just have to say it once, and then afterwards, it doesn't matter how seriously it's debunked later. It doesn't go
Yep.
away. Like, there was the one
Yep.
guy, Niall something, I can't remember, when he was saying that when Wuhan had the when they were at the height of the pandemic, they were allowing flights to fly out internationally. Turned out to be completely false.
Yes.
And he ended
Yes.
up admitting it somewhere too, but it doesn't matter. People still quote it. People still believe it.
No, I
Um,
mean, it's all part of a plan ultimately, and I'm glad we're actually taking a bird's eye view with all this and linking this all together ultimately, because people that think that these are separate issues and they can just jump from one thing to another without relating them all, it's now to a point where if you do that, you're burying your head in the sand. These
yeah.
tactics are related. They are heavily similar. They're recycling experts like no other, NGOs and reports and everything else. And ultimately, I think Xinjiang and the Uyghur situation. I mean, we can move on to actually talk about what's going on over there, rather than now that we've kind of thoroughly debunked the expert narrative, we can really try to talk about what's actually going on over there, the history of Xinjiang and the Uyghurs, the slave labor versus employment programs that are obviously taking place, and a lot of local support. I remember there was a CGTN video that basically showed that primary sources of the company saying you are free to investigate our work floors. You are free to look at anything, if there is slave labor being used or not. Everybody is welcome to take a look at them. And the local government saying, these think tanks that are publishing the report, I think it was the Australian think tank, ASPI or something, that is backed by weapons manufacturers.
All right. So sorry about that. I lost my connection there. I had to reconnect. But we were on
The
a we were on a
CIA, man, they're they're
but
they're really trying to tap in our phone lines and everything.
but before we continue, let me show you just to illustrate some of the, because earlier I said, how many people do we need to expose before you start asking questions? And so I want to show some examples of that too, because some people might just think we're just randomly saying that. But let's see here. Let me do a screen share. How do I do that again? Screen share. Okay. Application window. Here we go. So this is an example of one of the activists, Nathan Rooser. He is a overseas Uyghur activist, apparently, and he was sending me reports, and also Adrian Zenz's report. So I asked him, okay, all right, you want to talk about your report? Are you concerned that this new report, he's taking this new report as absolutely conclusive, those were his words, while it relies on testimonies from individuals who have completely changed their story and added new elements within a matter of months. So this is the person I was talking about earlier, Tersne Ziawadun. I probably pronounced it wrong. So before her first interview, 6 months before this, I wasn't beaten or abused, she said. The hardest part was mental. It was something I can't explain. You suffer mentally, being kept someplace and forced to stay there for no reason. You have no freedom. You suffer. And then the new report from Adrian Zenz, she said she was injected until she stopped having her period and kicked repeatedly in the lower stomach during interrogations, and now can't have children and often doubles over in pain, bleeding from her womb. This is she didn't go back to China between these two interviews. She was outside of China for the entire time. That's a pretty big change in story. And turned out,
How did he respond? I'm really
blocked me.
wanting to know.
Blocked me.
Blocked?
Yeah, blocked me. And then after he blocked me, I exposed that he is hired. He's works for ASPI, which is funded by the military industrial complex. Companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Boeing. And so he's calling me a tanky while he literally works for companies that manufacture tanks. And I came up with a new word for these guys that I've been trying to promote, which is called think tankies. They work for think tanks, but they are funded by manufacturers of actual tanks. And
Gotta start
yeah,
the
so
hashtag think tanky. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. But I mean, are we surprised, Daniel? Honestly, like I'm really what I'm actually surprised about, in all honesty, is that they are not giving us any benefit of the doubt that we can actually do research. Like we can actually Google, we can actually look them up. And it is Apple. It is stunning that they haven't figured this out yet, and they should at least put on some legitimate people that aren't bought. Obviously, I just,
yeah,
oh,
there he is, ASPI.
there you go, there you go.
So ASPI is these are the companies that they're funded by.
Huh,
Um,
beautiful.
and they just recently won a so this is Rushana Bastion. She was
Yep,
exposed working for
that's
the
the article.
CIA.
Yep, yep.
So ASPI, they just won a massive contract from, or at least they won a contract for their sponsors from the Australian government, like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons to counteract the China threat. And then also ASPI as the middleman for brokering the deal, which is like, oh, thank you for recommending that we buy military equipment from the companies that sponsor you, so they get an extra few $100,000 from the from the government as a middleman fee. So they're getting double paid, and it's like there's your motive. There's your motive. Like you need a motive for a crime too. There are people profiting hugely off of everybody's ignorance.
Yep. And they executed it beautifully. Unfortunately, they executed this beautifully by going to the UN, by making this report public, by basically tapping all the right networks to legitimize these concerns, drum up the fear, and get people to spend more on weapons. It's a clockwork cycle for the military-industrial complex, as we leftists call it. But at the same time, I think everybody's calling it now, and how they work. I mean, in all honesty, this is what I've been telling people. If you don't want China to be a threat, leave them alone and stop antagonizing them. Leave the South Sea. Stop going to Taiwan and selling weapons. Stop doing all this stuff. You have no business there. Like I can go on about how they're trying to infiltrate the country, and they're just trying to say, see what they're doing, see what they're doing. It's like, no, see what you're doing. See how you're trying to get a rise out of them with phony news stories and fake narratives and everything else like that. I was going to say, Daniel, I think did you have any legal education in your background when cross-examining this guy? Because this is class A impeachment technique here. Just showing them the evidence and just say, well, look at this, look at this. Can you actually say what's happening here? And immediate block. The jury would be out if you presented that case.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really quite remarkable. There's another one I wanted to find. I can't find it here, which was talking about these guys and the motive and everything like that. The interesting thing is, so right now, obviously, the U.S. is sanctioning all of these companies that they think, or they're trying to convince you, are responsible for atrocities against Muslims. And meanwhile, there was and nobody reported this. Let me see. I really got to find it. So basically, during this time, the U.S. government awarded a multi-billion-dollar contract to one of the contractors who was responsible for the Abu Ghraib abuses against Muslims, which they still haven't been held accountable for. So here it is. I found it. So they're blacklisting these companies like HIK Vision for providing surveillance equipment for what they think is happening in Xinjiang. But not only didn't they blacklist contractors who performed actual torture in Abu Ghraib against Muslims, but they still give them billion-dollar deals. So, this is the CIAC. They still haven't been held responsible. And look at this. They have been, this is 1.5 billion. Nobody reported this. I only found this by mistake because I just had this wild idea. I thought, I wonder what happened to the companies that actually caused, they know for a fact that did these things to Muslims. And I found this on CACI's website. It was under their press releases, and nobody has reported this. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, the United States has some really mental gymnastics when it comes to justifying the torture that they inflict on Muslims, whereas China really attempts to uh, alleviate their social social circumstances and whatnot as minorities and whatnot, poverty and things of that sort, and that's seen as inauthentic and oppressive. I mean, it's double speak. This is really like we don't torture, we liberate information. You know, it's really um, that kind of thinking is not only it's not only wrong and false, it's dangerous. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how many people are thumping the Bible saying we have to go because there's a Holocaust happening in China. What
It's
would you do in 1942? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, God.
it's yeah, it's a massive excuse, and people like it's in their face, like, you know. So Adrian Zenz's report also, this is interesting too, and it's interesting to get in the minds of people who try to basically dispute these things. So when you look at Adrian Zenz's report and you actually look at the data, the underlying data that he relied on, because he says I just got my data from the government directly, and it shows the population in Xinjiang going down. It actually shows that the Uyghur population has been going up. It's the Han Chinese
Yeah.
population that's been going down. And that's completely left out of the report for obvious reasons. But the interesting thing for me psychologically is the way people process this is they say, well, that's Chinese government data. Why are you going to believe that? And it's like, hold on a second. You were willing to believe it just a second ago because that's what Adrian Zenz says his report is based on. So
Yep.
do you want to believe it or not?
Yep. It's
People are
only
just,
their
yeah.
sources, not the other sources, you know. And this is why I always try to get down to the source, a truly neutral response. And I know, you know, there is this stereotype that governmental statistics and whatnot are biased and things like that. There certainly are biased in the United States with the COVID numbers and whatnot, trying to hide them to conflate campaigns and whatnot right now. But at the same time, when you look at population statistics, when even from the UN, and even though they are westernized to a certain degree, I mean, and when you see the other countries that are supporting China's vocational programs and Uyghurs initiative and whatnot, do, do you know what country supports them? Muslim countries, Middle East, like it's majorly Islam countries, you know, like I don't know how, like the only countries that are against the Uyghur programs that China is instituting is the West. I believe I had a map where it showed just the West highlighted as not supporting, but the Middle East, Africa, Indonesia, and Southeast Asia, Russia. I mean, all these countries, including Pakistan, Iraq, I think Saudi Arabia too. I mean, all of them were supporting these initiatives, and it's like, oh well, they're being sellouts for China because they hold the money. It's like, uh, there's no convincing them. You know, I think as much as we expose this truth, I think what we need to do is I really like what President Xi Jinping said, or I believe he said, it's not fighting fire with fire anymore. We need to fight fire with water. And I think it's incredibly important when we approach these sorts of issues that we do take critical analysis like we've been doing and saying, hey, these reports are BS. Your experts are backed by people that have an agenda. And if we want to stop all of these sorts of problems that we've been having, like we think that it's authoritarian Asia, in China and whatnot. How about we learn about them and understand them rather than charging in with guns, thinking we're liberating people? Because I don't know how many freaking times from after World War II, from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Chile to Nicaragua, Guatemala. I mean, the list can go on. Now Hong Kong, now Xinjiang, now Tibet or Tibet, and everything else. It's just ridiculous that we have not learned from these sorts of uh, repercussions. And I don't know. I mean, I'm really hoping that we can really dive into what's actually happening there. Like the Uyghurs are flourishing. I know that I don't know if you touched upon this or not in some of your videos, but like they still have their languages, they still have their mosques, they still have their cultural programs and everything else like that that preserve their culture. And Jerry, the guy who biked through Xinjiang from Germany, I think he has the most important narrative of just witnessing all this firsthand. And he
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah, and
a
when he was going through, that was kind of really before the propaganda against Xinjiang really ramped up. So
yeah.
he wasn't there with that goal. He was really just observing things around him. It was a very natural experience.
Right,
Um,
right. I mean, it's really frustrating that we just still try to push this narrative, and I'm really thankful for media outlets that are getting stronger, like CGTN, that are like putting these things out there in English for a lot of people like myself to understand and promote. Because um, a lot of people call me out saying, "Hey, this is a Chinese propaganda state-sponsored network, blah blah blah. How can you say that it's the same thing as the government statistics and whatnot?" But I'm like, look at John Oliver and see how he reports his quote unquote facts. He regurgitates Washington Post, New York Times, and just there's all these media outlets that he just regurgitates and take them as fact. When we look at CGTN and how they report, they go to governmental statistics, they interview people, they have letters, they have primary sources that are actually verifiable. And this is why it's so important. It's like, okay, yes, it's obvious that they have a agenda here, but at the same time, what is their technique to really get down to the issue? Are they just regurgitating ideology here? Are they just saying that they're right and we're wrong, and they're superior than us? No, it's very academic and scientific, and that's why I rely more on CGTN than anything else, because I really do appreciate their journalistic integrity and techniques. I mean, um, I do. I've seen so many things that they pointed out with this Uyghur situation as well, and how important it is and whatnot. But ultimately, I think they're doing a great job in stopping this propaganda. Really becoming a great challenger to all this. But with
yeah,
all
no,
that said, yeah,
yeah,
that's my
yeah,
rant.
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think people just need to. They just people don't care about the truth right now. They're making they're even participating in the lies. Like
Yeah.
there's this one guy. I remember this guy. He spent some time in Xinjiang, and
Uh,
he was there 18 years ago. But afterwards, he never spoke about Xinjiang anymore. He only kept talking about his experiences in other countries. And then after going to a free Hong Kong protest recently, all of a sudden he has many Uyghur friends that he lost in concentration camps, even though he never spoke about them before.
wow.
There was a huge, and then he even says he doesn't know a single Uyghur family who hasn't been torn apart by concentration camps. It's like, what? Why haven't you written about any of them in the last 17 years? Why did you wait until the like anti-Chinese propaganda started going up? And then he really said, I said to him, I said, like, why wouldn't you write about them? And he says, my story is irrelevant. I went there, made friends, and paid it relatively little mind until a few years ago. It's like, wait, hold on a second. So yeah, he didn't pay much attention to his friends in concentration camps until a few years ago when needing to make a point about China. It's like,
Seriously, what a
come on.
friend you are. Jeez.
Like,
Yeah, I mean,
seriously.
come on, dude. If I would be calling for help if that was my situation, and if you're not helping until it's convenient for you, where the spotlight is on you and maybe where the money is, no, thank you. You're not my friend. But and that's if it's true. And obviously, we know that it's more in line with the fact that, hey, I have this experience. Maybe if I twist or tweak the narrative a little bit, I can get some spotlight here or anything like that. I mean, it's when you start poking holes in these sort of first person narratives and things like that, you really start to see the bigger picture or the puppeteer that's behind it. Mostly it's money, but at the end of the day, you have people like Adrian Zenz, who is just nuts when it comes to ideology and thinking that they're relentlessly trying to stop authoritarianism when in reality, it's
yeah,
further from the truth.
Yeah, I mean, the money part, the money and attention, I think it might not be too far off from the point. I mean, these guys also, the Xinjiang victims database.
Mm.
This guy admitted, this account admitted, they're at $85,000 now. They've raised. They admitted that they don't necessarily guarantee the authenticity of anything they publish in their database. So they're bringing in tens of thousands of dollars. And they don't do that. And it's the same thing. It's a guy who used to live in Xinjiang and was living off of $300 US a month, living in hostels, and he was posting Uyghur cultural videos. I think this guy actually learned and speaks Uyghur, but nothing about any atrocities or anything like that while he was there. Just normal life with these kinds of different comedy sketches from Xinjiang. And then after he leaves, he starts this thing, and also got very offended at the story I told you about earlier, about exposing. So I exposed this guy. This is another guy too. This is a guy, a Uyghur activist whose family information kept changing. So he says to me, he joins in on a post and says, "Hey, I'm a Uyghur Canadian. I have a bunch of uncles and aunts and cousins disappeared. One cousin released last November, died a week later at age 29. Can you help me find the rest of my relatives?" I said to him, the best thing for you to do is to decide on an age for your missing uncle and stick to it. And also decide whether your cousin was released in early November or early September. A consistent story that doesn't keep changing will be more conducive to your investigation and or help convince your audience. So here the uncle,
I was going to say 60, 55. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. And then, yeah. And then also the date that the sister or whoever it was who died, it didn't change to earlier. It wasn't like, oh, actually she died earlier. It changed to after the first time he said that she died. Like the date of the person who he said died changed to after. Completely full of BS. So he responded afterwards by sharing. He said, "Well, how about this?" And then he shares a Douyin video of a mosque that has nobody around it, showing, "See, nobody goes to mosques anymore." And then I opened up the original Douyin account that he pulled it down from, and it was exactly during the time that the COVID breakout started in Xinjiang again, and it was like the city was on lockdown, and all the comments said that too. So one thing after another, and he just kept going. But when I exposed this guy, the Xinjiang victims database, they got really upset. They were like, "I'm going to report you because you're slandering and psychologically abusing relatives of a victim of an ongoing, mass crimes against humanity." I'm like, hold on a second. You're taking an issue with me pointing out that his uncle age continued to change. You're taking issue with me that their relative died. They changed the date to later.
They brought it to your doorstep too. And that's the worst part. They brought it to you, and you're pointing these things out, and they want to report you for that.
Yeah, this guy also. He I think he's a foreigner who speaks Uyghur dialect. Also learned it, and he's posting all of these things. He's posting some really interesting things, like these documents of people who are in re-education camps, which actually paint a very generous picture of the families who are left outside, because if their father or whatever is returning from fighting overseas or was radicalized, they can apply for like medical assistance and stuff like that. They're saying, okay, the person who's the working person of the family is in this re-education center, and they can apply for aid, like financial aid and stuff like that. And so I was actually interested to talk to this guy. And he says, "Oh, I was very nice to him, and I said, come on my show, and let's talk about it." And absolutely refused.
Well, of course. I mean, come on. We all know that the embarrassment that they're going to endure with this, But like I said, Daniel, I mean, this is why I was surprised you had such cool demeanor. I know the tactic and everything, but when you have these facts, and you just want to show it in their face, I don't know.
And look how nice I was. Like, I was seriously, legitimately trying to get him on my show. I say, he says, the question I've had since first visiting Kashgar in 2002, what does it mean to be Chinese and Uyghur, and why are those identities often and mutually exclusive? And I said, it's a great question. Talking about race and personal identity is a topic I've thought about my whole life, being mixed race myself. It's a topic we can cover also. I promise to take a respectful approach to the interview if you accept. Refused. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. He says, I just want you to retweet my my content. I'm like, well, this is first of all, this is my platform. And second of all, my YouTube has way more subscribers than my Twitter. So why don't you do this now? No, I didn't want to do it. And then he started getting really like snarky. He was saying he wanted to show off that he speaks Chinese. He didn't know that I speak Chinese also. He's like, oh, the butterfly, like hu die, this is how you say butterfly. I'm like, really? This is your and I've met people like this before where they learn a little bit of Chinese or they learn something and then they start wanting to really show off. And like I didn't tell him that I speak Chinese, but he's like really making an ass of himself saying, this is how you say butterfly. Like,
oh my god, this is like cringing. I'm literally cringing right now, just looking at this.
These people, like I put so much effort into this, and it's like you can only do so much of this. So when somebody comes to me again, oh, can you please find my uncle too? It's like you can only do this so many times.
Yeah,
you can only do this so many times, and you have to eventually ask yourself the question: if this is really happening, why are there so many liars surrounding this narrative? Why do you have to rely on so much fake crap if this is really happening?
I think I sent you the CGTN call out of CNN with the guy saying, oh, they destroyed my father's grave and whatever. But then CGTN actually goes to the site with the mom and I think his sister or cousins or whatnot. And they say, no, it's right here. It's right here. It's not happening. You know, and it's like absolutely mind-boggling that.
Yeah. And then the yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just they're being supported by their Western audiences, though, that don't challenge these things, you know. And when they finally find somebody like you saying, "Hey, can you help me find somebody?" It's like, "Oh, wait a minute, no, I'm going to challenge you on this." It's like, wait, I thought you were on my side, or I thought you were cool with it.
I didn't know you were going to actually fact check me.
Yeah, I can still speak Chinese, dude. Can't you? You know, like it's just like, come on, seriously, stop. You know this is BS, you know.
Yeah, this guy too. I don't know if you know this guy, James Palmer. He's a loud voice in this too. So he says he has lots of Uyghur sources that he works for. He's the senior editor for this foreign policy magazine, and very loud voice also. And he says he has so many Uyghurs who tell them about their families in camps. And the problem is when he speaks to he specifically looks for people willing to say what he wants. And as soon as you get a ethnic minority from Xinjiang who says, hey, James, you know, I'm from Xinjiang, come and visit and I'll show you around and, you know, I'll show you that why you're wrong. And this is what he says: go F yourself, you monstrous shill. He says this to ethnic minorities. An ethnic minority from Xinjiang tells him to go F himself because he's not willing to say what he wants to he wants him to say.
An actual ethnic minority. Jeez.
This is how they cultivate their sources.
Big time. I mean, your Twitter is super important in not only exposing all this stuff, but even right down to the basics. In a social media platform where individuals think they can show up and challenge these sorts of things. I mean, I've had my fair share of Twitter battles, don't get me wrong, especially when it came to China. I usually ignore them because it's really in bad faith. However, when you have this silver platter opportunity with these sorts of folks to call them out, especially when they have positions of authority like the foreign policy journalist and whatnot, it shows the double standards and it shows how inauthentic they really are with this. I mean,
I have a little bit of fun with it because I mean it's just so it's like it's right there in your face, and I mean it's the only thing you can do is to have keep a good attitude about while doing it, because the unfortunate truth is though that this stuff may lead to a conflict like we've never like the world has never seen before. If it
Yeah.
really
I mean,
excuses a conflict between China and the U.S. I mean, this is the
scary.
one Rushan Abbas. She admitted in her own words that she worked for the CIA in Guantanamo Bay. He says, yeah, the former Guantanamo Bay is, you know, the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay are way better than the Uyghurs' daily lives in China.
And
And
in
then so
that
I
same
did
line,
this.
you
Yeah.
have an issue with reality. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
while you say Uyghurs are better treated in Guantanamo Bay, come on.
Yeah, I thought this was an underrated tweet. Most of my tweets get more retweet shares than this. I said Rushan
Sure.
Abbas's tourism slogan for Guantanamo Bay. It's more funner than Xinjiang. I mean, at the end of the day, who doesn't want to enjoy a beachside Caribbean vacation complete with water sports?
I need to find that and I need to retweet it. Oh, that is just brilliant. I mean, it's so, and you're right with this. I mean, the best way to attack it is really in a positive, lighthearted nature that just really pokes jabs at their holes, their obvious holes. You know, I mean, the best example of this, I have to say, was when people started to expose those satellite shots of the shots of the prisoners or prisons, when in reality they were 5-star apartments. You know, the overhead shots were directly aligned with some new construction developments or like 5-star apartments, and they were not prisons. It's like, well, you know, I would like to live there, you know, if that's the case, you know. But come on.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and yeah, just these stories over and over. Even the guy I interviewed, Arslan, he was saying, oh, he doesn't know, you know, his father has been targeted to make an example out of him. But in the interview with Carl Zhao, I don't know if you saw that, like he was saying that he was the perfect example of a completely, you know, culturally assimilated Uyghur in China. He was even a member of the CCP. So it's like, why would you want to make why would they want to make an example out of him then and take him down from, you know, he says, oh, because to show that nobody's safe. But then after the interview with him, I looked him up. He's making commercials for Lincoln Navigator, and he's like, you know, at galas and on Uyghur TV shows, which are on Uyghur WeChat official accounts, and all the languages in Uyghur. Because one of the things he said too was that they're trying to eradicate the language. It's banned from public places. And he says, but it's really hard to enforce. But you know where it is really easy to enforce? On WeChat public accounts. You can just ban all Uyghur language accounts, but they don't. And his father-in-law, who's apparently missing, is showing up on there too, on all Uyghur accounts.
And didn't he say he can't phone call or he can't get in contact with his dad or whatever? I was like, dude, I think
but he admitted he admitted on Carl Zhaw's podcast that he was blocked by him, that his father-in-law blocked him on WeChat. And it's like, I wonder why he'd want to block his separatist. You know,
it must be a CPC plot. It really must be that the Xi Jinping actually went on the phone to block him. You know, it's these really ridiculous narratives, Daniel. I mean, I don't know how many times we've both been called Chinese shills being paid by the CPC and whatnot. I honestly wish I would be getting the amount of money they think I'll be getting from that. You know, but at the same time, it's like people like you, Jerry, Carl Zah, and these sorts of narratives that we're trying to present out to the world are extremely important because, as you said, we're literally in danger if we do go to war.
We are the world. Yeah.
China
Absolutely.
is no joke when it comes to military might, and I remember I was actually watching the 70th anniversary and just looking at their military and being at awe with with what's been going on there. I mean, the new technology, the weaponry, and everything like that. This is going to be devastating if there is a conflict, and to see, you know, the United States and the South China Sea constantly antagonizing China, and to see these Uyghur narratives, you know, building up the white knights over here to say, oh, liberation time for the concentration camps again, since we're professionals, when really it was actually Russia that did most of the heavy lifting in World War II. But then again, those are victims of communism that they've killed. But at the same time, with all that said, I am getting really frustrated, even with Western leftists. I don't know if I sent you there was this mini rebuttal, basically, two rebuttals actually from uh, one prominent Western leftist and one smaller viewer that was basically just regurgitating all these narratives. It's like, well, these were only like I remember specifically they were saying, well, these are only a couple interviews, and we have like 200 interviews of channels. It's like I remember they used the guy who was handcuffed to his bed and whatnot. I think that was revealed to be a hoax. The superstar Uyghur guy or whatever. There was another one. The
Oh,
video.
are you talking about the guy where he was in jail like for 12 days and then all of a sudden he was handcuffed to a bed but found a phone, found his
Yes,
phone which still had
yes,
battery, and then
exactly.
sent a bunch of selfies of himself to
It's like, dude, call your mom, call your family, somebody. Don't be sending that stuff. Come on. I mean, but the media ran with it. They didn't question it. It's like these are the stuff that you really have to question first before you put on primetime television, but they don't. And but it's obviously for something a little more sinister. And with weapons manufacturers getting rich while we're trying to tell the truth about this, that this isn't the case. It really is an uphill battle. But at the same time, I'm really glad that a lot of people are loving this content. Like I said, I'm growing at a really, really fast rate. You just reached 100,000 subscribers, and there are more and more people coming out of the woodworks. Especially, it really does help when you have Westerners who have visited or live in China right now that are saying, no, this is not happening. You guys need to stop. And I know if it's by this year, I know the EU is sending some of their commissioners to Xinjiang to check out the provinces and to take a tour and whatnot to actually see what's going on with the factories and everything. Again, I am skeptical on how objective they may be because after seeing that BBC report about
oh yeah.
the vocational schools being more like prisons and everything, it's absolutely frustrating how they try to squeeze that in
Yeah.
when in reality it's just
Yeah.
false narratives.
Vice,
You know?
Vice did the same kind of a thing.
Yeah,
The reports become about what they're not being shown, what they think is
yeah,
happening, not based on what they see. And then when Vice goes to Indonesia to do a coverage on the schools that are designed to de-radicalize the children of former terrorists or terrorists who were either killed
hmm,
or detained, they put beautiful music over top of the documentary and then rebranded it de-brainwashing. They're
yeah,
de-brainwashing them,
yeah.
and
And
yeah.
there's actually a great video. I have to send this to you. It's a soapbox video where this woman literally says, "Do you want a successful protest and revolution? Just start a protest in either Venezuela, Nicaragua, Iran, or China, and become an oppositional leader for freedom and democracy, and you'll probably even get that sweet U.S. aid AID money." And it's literally a marketing tool now for people who just want to get some free money. But at the same time, the repercussions of all this, it's, I don't know, like I said, with everything that has been happening, along with the doublespeak that is happening with the Western countries, on top of the fact that we have this absolutely crucial election that really isn't changing anything because Joe Biden is ramping up his anti-China rhetoric as well.
Yeah, it's
I
like a
mean,
competition. Who's going to hate China the most, isn't it?
yeah, it's really bad faith, to be honest, and they're picking up the same narratives and everything, but at the same time, I know I have a feeling what the Democrats may do is that they'll probably talk big and whatnot, but and they'll scale back some of the trade enforce or the trade obstacles and everything like that, and saying no, we're still fighting, but business is business, blah blah blah. But at the same time, uh, I know I saw your video on why 4 more years of Trump will is something that China is actually egging on, and seeing actually the progress China has done with Trump being a unified sort of unified wedge, if that's a oxymoron, if you ever heard one. Whereas Trump has really stagnated the United States, whereas China has rose because of that. 4 more years of Trump won't be that all bad either. However, the tensions are rising.
Yeah,
Especially,
I mean, the key is if it will take one wrong move, it will take
yeah,
wrong. Even if they don't, even if the intention isn't to start a war,
right.
we're getting so heated up that it's just going to take one small misstep,
They're
and
using
it's
civilian planes to spy on people now over there. I remember they retrofitted civilian planes, I think flying either from Malaysia or Taiwan to spy on people, like they're egging on a international incident to happen with a airliner. You know,
it's scary, and this is the time when we need people to think critically. They need to
right,
remember how many times they've been lied to about stuff like this before,
right, right.
and people just are they're ready for it. They're being primed for war. They're being completely flossed of their tax dollars in the case of Australia with these kinds of deals with companies like
Right.
ASPI, and and
Yeah.
and and people are just willingly going along with it.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let me show you. I just found something that just to quickly fill in from your. This is the one you were talking about.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they're saying Uyghur prisoners, and it wasn't. They were not. They were Han Chinese who were being arrested because
Right.
of a pyramid scheme in 2017. Um,
Exactly.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, come on.
and then
When you actually plug in these things, it's not surprising. What's
yeah,
this
and then
now?
so not a lot of people like to read Global Times, but actually I fact checked them. We always hear the word that 23 countries condemn what China's doing in Xinjiang, but what they don't
Hmm.
tell you is 54 countries uh, have gone. They have had people who have gone, and they said what they're doing is really good, and it's actually working really
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
they were mostly Muslim countries. Here's the actual document from the UN of these countries that are saying we've been there, and China's dealing with a
Yes.
serious issue,
Yes.
and they're doing a good job.
And
Um, I,
actually, not sorry to interrupt, but I remember not this is a I have a friend from Chow Collective, which is a fantastic group that has been
mm,
fighting
mm.
this sort of misinformation. Sean Kong actually messaged me. I interviewed him in one of my videos for a podcast video, and he messaged me this fantastic article with all these resources, heavily sourced article about what exactly is going on. And that 2354 number has been debated in the UN constantly. And there's a reason why the UN is not condemning them, because they have 54 countries, a majority, going against the vote. They're clearly not getting the majority vote needed to pass these sorts of resolutions. But what gets reported is 23 countries against the treatment of Uyghurs in China. Again, the spin is magnificent, but I feel with platforms like ours, platforms like others, and the people that are really questioning a lot, including Max and everybody else, their time is shortening. People don't want wars, especially one nuclear one or one that may end in utter devastation. Especially when like China, ever since the revolution on up, they've been really trying to alleviate poverty since that time, and it's utterly amazing. I don't know how many times, and you can probably attest to this. Um, Comparing what was in 2005 to 2014 to now, how the change
Oh, it's
has
massive.
just
Yeah.
been incredible. And whereas over here, California is trying to build almost $1 trillion bullet train from San Francisco to LA, and it's taking years to do. San Francisco has an empty terminal downtown, thinking that this California Speedway was going to happen, and it's not. Whereas China, my God, they
In the
expanded.
in the
Oh,
12 years I've been in China, there has been about 35,000 kilometers of subway, or sorry, of high speed rail done.
wow,
When I arrived in China, there was pretty much, other than the maglev in Shanghai, there was pretty much one high speed train from Shenzhen to Guangzhou, and it's not as fast as the high speed trains we've got now. And they've built
right.
tens of thousands of
And,
yeah, and
and going
in
as far,
in Shenzhen here, the subway system, they
sure.
had 2008 until now, they've built about, in just this city alone, they've built, I think, like 250 kilometers of subway line in the
Oh,
12 years that I've been
jeez.
here.
We had the Powell station in San Francisco. We had the longest project to just build from downtown Union Square to Chinatown, and that's literally just a couple blocks, and that took years, Daniel. I am not kidding you. The stagnating amount, and the inefficiency of our systems is just truly showing. And I'm. This is why when I look at issues like the Uyghur and Xinjiang and how it all links together, I can only admire China for what it's gone through and what it's continuing going through. I mean, just on the train stuff alone, they were able to build. I seen a CGTN documentary and how they were building this train all the way out there through the mountains, through everything.
It's
To
tough.
build a station out there, yeah. I mean, a lot of people died doing this as well. But at the same time, they really try to uh, push the innovation and development and progress to bring them um, uh, to these opportunities. And a lot of people, which is frustrating, there's actually a really good informational video about the development of the speedway in China that's made by a Westerner. But you can see the little biased tidbits that they leave behind when they say, "Oh, they're just reaching out with their train policy because they want to unify China more and bring these ethnicities together and everything." And it's like, dude, it's not a plot. Yes, unity is important, but there's jobs to be had. There's opportunities to be had here, not some evil unifying plot. And it goes back to the stereotype too of the communistic tentacles, entrapping the world and everything. It's absolutely frustrating. Again, referencing my video, I'm actually going to talk about the negative stereotypes that China has had throughout the United States, at least when it came to the Chinese Exclusion Act, when it came to using Chinese laborers and whatnot, and how stealing IP and threatening white people's wives, children with their it's really toxic stuff. And then we see narratives that they're stealing IP, that we don't know what they're doing, and again regurgitating over and over. And with this, it's going back to oppressing minorities, and we need to help them. But look at this crying child being separated from his mother. No, no, not the one at the border, the one in China. It's such a hat trick that
Yeah.
they're really
Yeah, I
playing.
mean,
But
people don't. They're just. I mean, it just seems like there's fear. People are scared of. They don't want people to see how well things work here, as is exemplified by PBS's documentary on poverty alleviation being banned for being too pro Beijing. And
big
people
time.
are happy here. People are unified. There was the study by the Ash Center at Harvard that showed that 95.5% of Chinese people in China are satisfied
And
with their government.
I always throw that back in Western leftist faces when they say, we're not for the government, we're for the people. Well, the people want their government, and it's not done by the government saying that 95% of people support it. It's from Harvard, a Western institution,
Yeah.
And even reading that report, I remember reading that report, and it even had a little tidbit saying, "Oh yeah, well their rates are really high, but people are expecting China to keep it up, and they have a responsibility." Like, they're still trying to put a negative spin on it. It was really frustrating to read that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
That's it.
and this one right here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, and then bringing it back into the Xinjiang topic, there
Mm,
are there were there are tens of thousands of Uyghurs who travel to Saudi Arabia.
mm.
There are many of them. You can even see them on YouTube that cross the border over into neighboring countries for shopping and come back. Um, there are refugee camps. There are places where people can claim asylum in the countries surrounding
Yeah,
China and Xinjiang. Why aren't
yeah,
they full of Uyghurs if they want?
yeah.
If the situation is so bad here, why aren't they leaving?
Yeah.
It just like people. People just
Whenever
aren't
there
thinking.
is a genocide, I mean, come on, we can actually do a study on this. Whenever there is a genocide, there is usually a huge diaspora, or there's a huge migration of people. Hell, we see, I mean, granted, this was a war, but we've seen this in Syria when people from Syria try to migrate up to Europe, you know? And if there is obviously this great concentration camp oppression, we would see some statistics showing that there's a flood of Uyghurs leaving China and none to be found. You know, where are the refugee camps? Where are the mass migrations of Uyghurs leaving? And they're leaving, all right, but then they're coming back. They're doing the touristy stuff, and they're coming back to their hometowns. You know, like any other country. And this goes out to everywhere else as well. Like China has so many tourists traveling around the world in general, and they obviously come back as well. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to um, the double standards when looking at this all. But ultimately, it's incredible that
Yeah.
stuff like that, like from migrations all the way up to the cultural sites, is just completely ignored. What's this
Yeah,
now?
this is a Xinjiang YouTuber, a Uyghur girl, going across the border, crossing the border to go shopping,
Wow.
and coming back. She's actually pretty. She's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I'm subscribed to her channel,
But she's really
and
popular too. Yeah.
she's really popular. There was one video she did I really didn't like. She told her younger brother that that he was like found in the garbage or something like that. You know, like
Oh
sometimes you
wow.
make fun of. It's just like
It's a sibling stuff. Yeah.
it's
Don't
a
get me
sibling
wrong.
stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
and I felt so bad for him. He started crying, and then he's like, and then she tried to make it up after she was hugging him, saying, "Oh no, 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 I was just joking. I was just joking." But I was like, you meanie. But still,
Well, I mean, and that's another thing we should really actually touch upon here. There are a lot of Uyghur celebrities that are successful in China as well. Like
yeah.
when I was doing the John Oliver report, a bunch of people were sending me, "Hey, check out this celebrity," and CGTN highlighted 6 Uyghur celebrities to show how successful they are, and it was just like, what? This isn't some conspiracy here if they are literally promoting their culture and their people into. I mean, hell, Arslan's father, is a celebrity, doing all this stuff and is getting so much promotion and so much support. And I actually see all these young Uyghurs too, just having a blast doing regular stuff like
Well,
anybody
one of
else.
my one of the favorite points that you made, my favorites of points that you made was that I think it was during your poverty alleviation video.
Mm,
You mentioned that if there was something like where people are talking about Nazi Germany, where they were talking about an Aryan race, and where here,
right.
if they were trying to promote this idea of Han superiority, you'd think it would be
Hmm.
showing up in the media a bit. It
Yeah,
would be you'd
big
be
time.
seeing things that reinforce that message, and it's the complete opposite. It's about
Yeah.
embracing those cultures. And as I
I mean,
showed in Tibet too, if Han Chinese
you
are living in those areas, they have to learn their local language also.
Yeah, you literally have the president of the country visit these places and saying, "We are unified, we're going to grow together, and we're going to work together." There is absolutely no superiority complex with that. I mean,
And yeah, yeah, and furthermore, like for my wife, like so from just like everybody else in China, in their hometown, they have a local dialect. But she's Han
mm,
Chinese, and
mm,
they do not learn their local dialect in school. It's not like the ethnic
oh,
minorities
wow.
where they can learn their, Han Chinese don't get the Han Chinese. They just have to learn at home. I mean, mind you,
Right,
they don't have their own character set or anything like that.
right.
But the ethnic minorities in China get way more support. They're able to enter universities with much lower rates. They were
Yep,
not subject to the one child policy like Han
yep.
Chinese were. I mean, it's like everything points in the opposite direction of what people are trying to tell you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I actually talked about this with Sean in the podcast. It's like, can you imagine if we had those policies for black and brown people in the United States? What an uproar that would be if a Hispanic or African American got a lesser sentence simply because of their minority status, which is obviously really relevant right now and really important. But Sean said that criminal sentencing or university admission, one-child policy, and whatnot, and it's kind of interesting that they were exempt from the one-child policy, and they have access to birth control and whatnot now, but that's now seen as sterilization. I really am incredibly disappointed about this forced sterilization narrative. When I see my own communities actually get sorry yeah, just actually get inflicted by this. It's it's really bad. I mean, when I see women from my communities that are locked up in cages, that are literally silently suffering, whether it's the systematic sexual suppression that happens there, whether it's the um, forced sterilizations, whether it's, I mean, they even found mass graves by the border. I'm kidding you not. Like, uh, all this cover up, and this is the actual genocide that is happening in the world today. But because of the Western media twist and terms, we're more focused on vocational schools and programs that are actually that we need here, that my community needs here, that Black and Brown communities need here. That they are that they're not getting it, and it's being suppressed not only because it's against the overall narrative, but yeah, I'm sorry about my getting a little emotional there.
No,
I
no, no. It's
really think
understandable.
yeah, I
It's
really think
understandable,
it's
and
a bad way.
it, it it makes me think of the video I saw of Muhammad Ali when he was, when they were talking about
Yeah,
invading Vietnam, when he was
yeah,
like, "Why am I going to go halfway across the world to fight some people in the mud that I've got no problem with,
yeah,
and you don't
yeah,
even stand up for my rights at home. You're not even
yeah.
doing anything for me here at home. You're the one who's my oppressor, and
Right.
I'm going to go." Yeah, he says, "No, no way."
I mean,
Um,
when you see, I highly recommend, and this is actually one of the movies that, or documentaries that radicalized me, a Huey P. Newton story. He says the same thing when it came to Vietnam, and it's highly relevant. You know, when Black and brown people are fighting the white man's war, when the other man hasn't attacked us for any reason, and we come back to be arrested, murdered, and other oppression that we don't deserve. And it's when we see those things, and even up to this day, where I actually made a small meme about this, where Colin Kaepernick actually was peacefully protesting the brutality that has been going on here with our police, and going back to, sorry if there's noise by the way, uh, and then going back to Huey Newton, when he visited China, and him saying that this was the first time I met a man in a uniform with a gun and I wasn't scared, you know, and it was just mind blowing. Some like literally, um, the mantra of the left is all cops are bastards, all cops are not good, and it's like but when you actually see somebody as radical as Huey Newton, the founder of the Black Panther Party, fighting cops and everything like this, actually say this was the first time that I wasn't scared in a man with a uniform with a gun, it's like it's not about the authority here. It's about what are we doing for the people and how are we pursuing it. It's more about fighting for what's right for our communities and the obvious injustices that are happening, because I really it is absolutely frustrating and emotional sometimes when that narrative is being buried, when it's literally here at our home over the narrative that is happening overseas, that is just we're attacking somebody's sovereignty, we're attacking a country's sovereignty, we're attacking everything else. And I honestly think uh, this is something that obviously I'm passionate about, and it's worth challenging, it's worth risking, and it's really worth trying to stop that nonsense once and for all. So
Yeah, no, no, totally understand. And I think when you really put it into context like that too, that it just seems like such a deliberate distraction when you
mm,
tie in the fact that all of the things they're accusing everybody else of doing, they're doing themselves.
yeah,
Um,
I mean that's the most despicable thing. That's why a lot of people had a problem with my John Oliver response at the end when I actually say, really, you want to shove a crying child being separated from his mom in front of my face, and they're saying, oh, that's whataboutism. That's you're not being fair. Both are bad. Both sides are bad. BS. And it's like, no, you have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea the atrocities that the West has done all around the world, and to just accuse and allege by faulty evidence that this is happening in another country like China, you're just as despicable. I cannot stand it, because we actually have a worse situation actually going on here. And they're saying forced sterilization is happening there because they're offering birth control to women? Come on. I just, I really am glad, and I'll continue to fight it. Like I said, um,
yeah.
we'll see how it goes, but
So
I'm really
was
happy.
there? I'm curious. I'm more like moving to a little bit of a personal topic. Was there like a
Sure.
specific moment where you all of a sudden kind of had epiphany? Said, hold on a second," because for me, like also, growing up in Canada, also we're subjected to all of the American propaganda. There is all the superheroes
Yeah.
are American, and we're led to believe that we're going around the world, doing good things, and then it hits you, and all of a sudden you see it's like, hold on a second, are we the bad guys?
And
Um,
were we the baddies? Yeah. Um, I would have to say it was actually so. There's a great Slovenian philosopher, communist philosopher called Slavoj Žižek. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
I've heard of the name.
His Yeah, he did a couple of great documentaries, kind of exposing what ideology actually is. And there's a great scene from the movie They Live where the wrestler Piper, the guy, he was fighting another guy to just put the glasses on and see what's actually happening, seeing you know, the money saying this is your God, the advertising saying marry and reproduce, controlling people like that, because that's what it is. It's really um, ideology like that. But you actually have to fight to put that on. And I think it's such a great scene and how Slavo explained this, because I had to fight. I had to shed down the taboos and shed down the narratives from my culture, from growing up, even in somewhere as liberal as San Francisco, growing up with the toxic communist or socialist mentalities that this is not going to work. Capitalism is freedom, democracy, blah blah blah. And it was a struggle. I mean, I did. It was almost like an avoidance to say no, no, I'm not a communist. I just think these programs are important and people should be helped. Blah blah blah. But when I actually embraced it, when I actually finally won that fight and revealed that, there was no going back. I mean, I really finished up because this was years, Daniel. This was a couple of years of exploring who I was and
mhm.
finally saying to myself, um, okay, I am a Marxist, Leninist, communist, whatever, and I know that's been sort of that's even taboo to say right now.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't want to lose any legitimacy with my points by saying that either, because I know the tabooness that comes with those labels, with the bias and everything as well. But
Yeah.
I think the biggest push for me was when I was in law school. I hung out with a lot of diverse minority students and how
Mm.
they were challenging the narrative to say, why do we only learn about black and brown people when it comes to criminal law or immigration law? Why don't we talk about the contracts that we couldn't have as slaves? Why couldn't we talk about the torts that happen in the projects and how come we can't sue the landlord? Why don't we talk about those things? And I was like, yeah, right on. This is good. Yeah. I was like, I'm gonna hang out with these people. And they weren't radicals. They weren't they didn't call themselves even leftists. They were pretty liberal too, but then they were really woke. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be comfortable with my skin and hang out and be honest with my ideas. And hell, I'm in freaking law school, getting a freaking law degree. I think I can know a little bit with what I'm talking about here if I can properly investigate this stuff too. My God, there's no more being ashamed. I've been studying this stuff for years on top of the skills that I'm getting with my degree. It's time to be unashamed. Obviously, this is comes with it, but at the same time, that's more about a protectionist move rather than a flaunting mood. I don't want to be short-sighted and flaunt who I am while exposing myself, but at the same time, I'm really proud in exposing these sorts of truths when it comes to it. So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think of a conversation I had just a couple of days ago with my buddy from Hong Kong. There are people from Hong Kong who kind of wake up to the same kind of the Western BS also, despite what we're seeing in the media, that it looks like everybody's agreeing with the West. Is far from it.
right,
And
right.
my buddy was saying that when he was growing up in British Hong Kong, they learn a little bit about Chinese history, but they stop before the Qing dynasty and they stop before any of the century of humiliation. And it's like that's like, why aren't we learning about this? It's like,
Yeah.
something to do with opium, or let's skip over that part. And that's the wake up moment.
Yeah. It's like U.S. history where you stop at the Thanksgiving dinner and you don't learn about the Indians again until Manifest Destiny and how they prettied up genocide. Basically, it's pretty. I could go on another episode about Hong Kong and what's going
are you
on
still there? Did I
down
lose you?
Oh, I hear you. Do you still hear me?
Okay, 1 second. All right, sorry about that. We got cut off there, but we've been going on for a while. There's an interesting discussion. The reason I was asking about the transition, maybe we'll wrap up with this, but we should definitely have more chats. Especially curious about your findings in the book you read,
Agreed.
Socialism with Chinese Characteristics. But for me, I'm driven by a few things. One is that it looks like there's a conflict that's coming, that's being excused, and everybody's falling in line, just like they did every other single time, without learning any of the valuable lessons that have been laid in front of us over the past few years. And I grew up too thinking that the West was a force for good, and then when you start looking into what was going on, it really wakes you up. It was just a long process for me too, because even while I was in China, for the first 5 years I was in China, I was still buying all of the anti-China propaganda, and I was living here. So I can only imagine how difficult it is for somebody outside of China to really release themselves from this lifetime of conditioning. But there were little bits and pieces that happened along the way that kind of started making me ask questions. I guess, there might be like you, it's not just necessarily one specific epiphany moment, but where there are little things that happen. And I want to share a video of one of those things. This was one of the things where I thought people should have been cheering Ron Paul's question, and instead of booing him and shaming him, I was just like, this is the first time I asked, what is going on? I'll play that.
Sure.
I'll play that now. Hold on 1 sec.
What changed? The non-interventionist policies.
No, non-intervention was a major contributing factor. Have you ever read about the reasons they attacked us? They attack us because we've been over there. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years. We've been in the Middle East. I think Reagan was right. We don't understand the irrationality of Middle Eastern politics. So right now we're building an embassy in Iraq that's bigger than the Vatican. We're building 14 permanent bases. What would we say here if China was doing this in our country or in the Gulf of Mexico? We would be objecting. We need to look at what we do from the perspective of what would happen if somebody else did it to us.
Are you suggesting we invited the 9/11 attack, sir?
I'm suggesting that we listen to the people who attacked us and the reason they did it, and they are delighted that we're over there because Osama bin Laden has said, I am glad you're over on our sand because we can target you so much easier. They've already now, since that time, have killed 3,400 of our men, and I don't think it was necessary.
You want to allow me to comment on that? That's really an extraordinary statement. It's an extraordinary statement of someone who lived through the attack of September 11th, that we invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11th.
This is what is going on?
Mind-boggling. And we wonder why we have Trump now. Ugh.
I would ask the congressman to withdraw that comment and tell us that he didn't really mean that.
Congressman?
I believe very sincerely that the CIA is correct when they teach and talk about blowback. When we went into Iran in 1953 and installed the Shah, yes, there was blowback. The reaction to that was the taking of our hostages, and that persists. And if we ignore that at our own risk. That if we think that we can do what we want around the world and not incite hatred, then we have a problem. They don't come here to attack us because we're rich and we're
rich and we're free.
Yeah.
It's like when I saw that, I remember watching that and thinking, well, hold on a second. What he said was entirely reasonable. To ask reflective questions. What's going on with the audience? And that was one of the kind of moments where I started.
Yeah, I was going
to
to
ask
say.
more
I mean,
questions.
it's those little tidbits, that really make you question. I mean, there's actually I don't really watch the show, but it's called the Whitest Kids You Know, and it's about sitting in the back of the school bus, and the guy throws his lunch outside the window, and the guy's like, "Oh, but now I don't have a lunch." It's like, "It's all right, dude. I'll share your lunch." It's like, "No, now you sound like a communist." It's like, no, it's more like socialist. And actually, socialism is pretty good when you actually think about it. It's just sharing with others what they need and working for what's right, blah blah blah. And the bus driver didn't pay attention to them throwing stuff or doing anything, but right when they talk about doing that, the bus driver, "Hey, knock it off! Don't do that! Don't make me stop!" And he finally stops, and that could not be a better reflection of how we are trained when it comes to these sorts of things. It's not only, like you said, it's not only about socialism or communism, it's about the narrative in general. When somebody like Rand Paul, who is not obviously a leftist, but can say, we got to look at the blowback that's going on here. They didn't come here to attack us because we're rich and better than them. They attacked us because we've been bombing them. We've been attacking them.
But the funny thing is it legitimately looks like America's now attacking China because it's becoming richer and better than them.
On point. Oh man. The hypocrisy, I mean, and this is what we had down here for our closing, the Western hypocrisy, and what this truly is a signal of. The Western hypocrisy is more like a signal of a symbol of Western decay. When you see what happened with the Uyghurs and Hong Kong and TikTok and innovation and weapons and everything, when all this comes together and you see the scramble that people are feeling comfortable with Trump more than, obviously more establishment liberals, it's really saying something about our conditions. And I think the Uyghur, like Trump, like Hong Kong, is all part of the symptom that we really need to address the West about.
The first thing people should do also in the West is if they really care about the Xinjiang issue, they really want to educate themselves, they should watch the 3 documentaries that were released on the terrorism problem that they're facing in like, how could anybody in their right mind? That was the first time those images and videos were declassified by the Chinese government. And yes. I'm thinking about the problem because, obviously after the 9/11 attacks, it was a very difficult time for brown people in North America. They thought you were Muslim, you were attacked. There were guys who were stabbed, mosques were burned down. And so what China decided to do is say, if we air these videos of people being chopped up in train stations by Uyghur terrorists, mind you, Uyghurs were also chopped up also. They were chopping up everybody. Then this is going to cause a serious problem between the people, and there's going to be people who retaliate. And so they
But
decided to
look at
censor
the
it. When
and look at the
when the
blowback now, though. I mean,
yeah,
come
yeah.
on, now,
When the situation calmed down, they finally declassified it, and everybody
now,
can see it,
now.
and nobody's watched it. You know, I want to play one video because this guy says something really good about that, and it ties
Sure.
into the hypocrisy. It ties into the people not watching these documentaries. 1 second, let me see here. How do I put this back in here?
There you go.
Oh, hold on. I got to put the speaker on for you to pick it up.
It's quite astonishing that the corporate-owned media in the United States, which has said for the last 20 years that the war on terrorism is so important, so critical, so central for America and for the world, to basically ignore these two documentaries about terrorism in Xinjiang. I mean, these two documentaries, if the people see them, if the American people see them, they will understand what China is trying to contend with. That China is trying to stop a major terrorist problem in a big part of its country. Now, why is the United States media ignoring it? Because it does not fit the political narrative, which is designed to stereotype and caricature and demonize China as an abuser of human rights. So the American media is saying this isn't between terrorism and counterterrorism. This is between democracy and human rights and a tyrannical government. By showing the documentary, people actually would understand that China's description, its narrative that they are fighting terrorism is real. I think it is an imperative need for the American people to see these documentaries. Why have animus and hostility between the United States and China when the American people are not getting the facts? They need the facts. They need the truth. There's nothing to hide here. If the American people see these documentaries or learn the facts, they will think, yes, China has a right, in fact, an obligation and a duty to stop terrorism amongst its own people, to stop terrorism from harming its own people. So it's a real need. It's a real imperative requirement that the American people and everyone get a chance to learn the truth. One way to learn the truth is by watching these documentaries.
Bravo.
So it's
Bravo.
obviously 3 documentaries now. But the obvious issue with putting too much attention on it is that this becomes a little bit more difficult.
I spent 31 years in the military. Here is what it has decided for Afghanistan. I bet you don't know this either. We're in Afghanistan as we were in Germany post-World War II. That is for at least a half a century. It has nothing to do with Kabul and state building, nothing to do with fighting the Taliban or proving that we can reconcile with the Taliban, and nothing to do with fighting any terrorist group, because it is the only hard power the United States has that sits proximate to the Central Base Road Initiative of China that runs across Central Asia. If we had to impact that with military power, we are in position to do so in that case. And second reason we're there is because we're cheek and jowl with the potentially most unstable nuclear stockpile on the face of the earth in Pakistan. We want to be able to leap on that stockpile and stabilize it if necessary. And the third reason we're there is because there are 20 million Uyghurs, and they don't like Han Chinese in Xinjiang province in Western China. And if the CIA has to mount an operation using those Uyghurs, as Erdogan has done in Turkey against Assad, there are 20,000 of them in Idlib in Syria right now, for example. That's why the Chinese might be deploying military forces to Syria in the very near future to take care of those Uyghurs that Erdogan invited in. Well, the CIA would want to destabilize China, and that would be the best way to do it, to foment unrest and to join with those Uyghurs in pushing the Han Chinese and Beijing from internal places rather than external.
Divide and conquer. It's
Yep.
what they do.
Yeah. I mean,
But-
it's really stunning how we see this, and the narrative. This I actually tried to explain to Western leftists how this is a actual serious issue, and how terrorism. It's a state's responsibility to take care of its people, and when you have terrorism as a threat, there needs to be a reaction to further protect the people, or else the sovereignty of the state loses legitimacy. Hey, this government is not protecting us. We may have to fend for ourselves here. That's why they're stepping in. Now, when I tried to present this, they were going on with calling me Islamophobic, that I'm using Fox News tactics to justify a war on terror before because we've seen all this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you have to understand, I am not calling the Uyghurs uncivilized. I'm not trying to demean or degrade their culture. What I'm saying is that terrorism has been a problem here where people have died. The state has a responsibility to protect them. But instead of, like I said before, instead of bombing and invading countries while having the superiority complex in the media, they're actually taking a different approach, and
Yeah.
it's really uh, it doesn't go into any critical analysis or thinking if we constantly equate China's action with the Uyghur and terrorist problem with what the United States has done, while blindly skipping over the fact that there were no bombs or invasions or guns shot in different countries to quell terrorism in China. And instead, they use vocational programs in schools, employment programs, housing programs, and everything else to stop it. But like you said, if those programs are shown in somewhere like Indonesia, then they get the beautiful songs and the uplifting narratives that this is a good thing. And like I said, full circle, but I really think those really show not only the significance on this is being ignored, but why this is being ignored. Because, they're setting up the pins. They're setting up
Yeah,
invasion
absolutely.
patterns. It's part of an empire strategy, and
All the warning signs, are
yeah.
there for the same thing that's happened over and over again, and
I was going
nobody's
to say,
any.
if you actually see, I always remember Killer Mike's video. I'm glad Reagan's dead. I don't know if you heard of Killer Mike, the rapper. He endorsed Bernie or whatnot. Kind of, liberal social democrat, this and that. I didn't really appreciate his later actions with some of the riots that have been going on and whatnot. However, he did say, we bombed Afghanistan and then we bombed Iraq, and Ahmadinejad is scared for his life being in between these two countries, saying that they're coming for Iran. And it's like we think that we're doing. We think that this is just random invasions. The weapons of mass destruction is here, and Osama bin Laden and the Taliban is here, and Iran is just so happened to be in the middle, and right next to our enemies, Russia, China, and everything else. Don't worry, though. This is,
Yep.
we're all just pursuing an agenda here. No, this is really executed, planned empire
Yep.
that we're
And
talking
and,
about.
and none of these people who are pretending to care about this false narrative in Xinjiang, none of them are talking about the slaves being traded in Libya in open markets right now.
No,
No,
not at
not
all.
none of
I
them are
mean,
talking about what America has done to what was one of the richest nations in Africa, a country that was
yes,
planning on making a Central African currency, which was gold backed and might have challenged the
yes,
U.S. dollar. Maybe that's where they went really wrong too. And
yes.
nobody's talking about what's going on there anymore, and they're pretending to care about Muslims in China. Give me a break.
I mean, if you actually want to talk about the seriousness, and I bring this up with Western leftists all the time when they try to say, the people should revolt in China to fight back the workers, blah, blah, blah. It's like, do you understand what happened to the Soviet Union when they fell? 40% of their life expectancy fell. GDP, every single standard of living measurement fell drastically. And that goes for Eastern Europe. That goes for everybody else, Cuba, and everybody that really relied for them as a trading partner and whatnot. The only survivor that adapted extremely well was China. And to say that, China should go through that too, that's bad faith. That's ludicrous. If you don't learn from history on how Libya, how or how they're trying to liberate Syria and all these different places. And you think that should happen in China? My goodness. I mean, I've heard so many narratives too that the imperialism is good, or their freedom is good now that they're not oppressed.
Did you see the video that I posted recently on Twitter? I didn't realize it was Angelina Jolie. I thought it was just a random journalist where she's walking through like a bombed village that the U.S. had bombed, and she was talking about how these people have nothing. They're lifting the rubble up with their hands. You can smell bodies underneath the rubble and stuff like that, and say they have nothing now, but at least they have their freedom now. And it's like, it's like, what? It's like they can smell the flesh of their relatives under the rubble that they're removing by hand, but at least they've been freed now. It's like, this is seriously how people think. I don't know if she was being ironic. I don't know if it didn't seem like it. It seems like this is legitimately how people think.
It's almost like a South Park satire sort of mantra. It's like, at least you're free. It's like, no, like I actually talked in my most recent video on China and their foreign policy with Africa. I brought up Dambizi Moyo. She's a Zambian woman. Yeah, she's a Zambian woman economist that really had it really on point when it came to foreign aid and how China's alleviating the poverty down there, which is fantastic. And she did say, where was I going with this point? Sorry, I'm blanking on this. But what were we talking about?
So, we're freedom. I know. I don't know if this is the point you want to make, because this is the point I really like from her too. She points out how the Freedom House shows that 70% of democracies around the world lack basic freedoms. So it's like, people talk about these words like democracy, freedom, and liberation, and they don't actually know what they mean. They don't actually understand.
Especially to people that don't even have food in front of their faces. We're talking about poverty, less than $1 a day places over here, and you want to talk about freedom and democracy when they've been trying to implement that system, but it just cycles corruption. It cycles no standard of living increase for anybody. But now when the China comes in and they're not bothering anybody, they're just making partnerships and whatnot, and they're showing a different government that works really, really well. I mean, she really does a great job with her TED Talk explaining all this, how China is challenging the liberal democracy narratives. And but I really don't like how she does try to say we need to do better. It's like, no, we're not going to. There's no alliance here that's going to be made with liberal democracies in China, obviously, especially as we're seeing this with Trump. I sympathize, and then no, that point not going to happen, because we have our own agendas where we can't ally ourselves with a different government style and whatnot, on top of the fact that it's not capitalistic, it's socialist and everything. I mean, it is a nice story of cooperation where two governments, despite their differences, could come together and work to alleviate poverty.
I think it doesn't matter what China does right. It doesn't matter if they eliminate poverty. It doesn't matter if they do everything right for the people. It's just wrong because it's communist. And this is a perfect opportunity to share a video with you from Disney that actually really shows you how you are indoctrinated from childhood. So this is a kids show. This is a kids show on Disney. I don't know if you've seen this.
Let's see.
Have you seen this video?
Oh, yes. Everybody had a problem with it. Yes, go ahead and roll it. This is,
okay. Let me play. This is good.
Miss Hart. Miss Matthews. Farkle. 100%. You get a C.
What? We get a what's that you say now? How do I get 100% and get a C?
Because when you get everything right, but you don't do it yourselves, it makes you average. A divided by 3 is a C. Look at you. You're all the same. You're average. You're common.
Communism. This is why it fell. People didn't want to all be the same.
Without incentive, there's no motivation. Without motivation, there's no advancement. In a truly free society, we share the best parts of ourselves without cheating. Because we get to learn who we are individually. Come on, guys. Separately, you're the best individuals I know. I miss you. Please come back.
I would just like to say that the American flag in the background is so neatly placed, is so conveniently placed as he's doing this spiel against communism. I mean,
It doesn't matter if you get everything right. It doesn't matter if you beat everybody else. The
really,
individual is what's the most important, and it's exactly why people can't do a simple thing like wear a mask. It's about their individual freedoms during a pandemic.
bravo.
Even though we also have from the first pandemic a neighborhood in California that went on a rally against masks. That's exactly where most people died, and they had a huge outbreak because
Mm,
no, we can't think as a collective. We can't cooperate. We're not supposed to cooperate. We're supposed to be individuals.
no,
It just,
no. I mean, and I really actually studied this in college too. When I got a political science degree, and it does go to our rugged individualism. You know how we were able to beat the odds and make a. It goes to the what's his name, Living in America, Valley or something like that. He created this book about American individualism, and that became so a part of our culture where in reality it shoots us in the foot. And like you said, when it comes to skepticism from our experts, where they're literally telling us just wear our freaking masks, and people are saying no because of liberty, it's it's a bad sign. And it really makes me want to visit China sooner rather than later because I really know where this may be headed. But at the same time, I know that a lot more viewers and a lot more people are going to say, wait a minute. And this is when I'm learning more about Asian culture, what Eastern culture, and everything overall. Uh, the collective mentality is something that should be admired more. It should not be. I mean, don't get me wrong. Individualism has its place in certain
Mhm,
aspects and whatnot, and
mhm,
it's really important, obviously. But when you see places like the Soviet Union, um, who who were the first persons in space, who literally won the space race, but you're saying everybody's average and common, even though they literally beat the United States in every single portion of that except going to the moon. I mean, they on top of the fact that their space program launched Polish people, Cuban people, and everything else, that they're still that's still buried because they're communists and everybody's equal and everybody's the same. That whole narrative, that whole definition is a played out trope that doesn't really understand what this ideology and what this system is all about. Of course, you're an individual in China. Of course, you're an individual in other places, but there's more collective. It's more of a collective nature. When I was seeing I did a apology video. One of my first videos is, Dear China, I'm sorry, which basically kind of says, I'm sorry for the racist attacks. I'm sorry for our backward sort of mentality and individuality when it comes to spreading this virus while blaming you all, which you all were able to shut down an entire city in moments once this was shown, a city as big as Chicago, and everybody around the world demeaned you and just criticized you for your authoritarianism. But once they got it, they did the exact same thing,
yeah.
and it was just so. And this is why I get so frustrated with it because I remember the kind of propaganda that was being talked about with Wuhan and with Xinjiang too, with the COVID-19 situation over there, and they were just building on the narrative of attacking the Uyghurs through the COVID-19 measures and whatnot. But at the same time, when this was implemented over here, the racist trope of it's a China virus, it's a Chinese virus, and everything like that, rather than actually I don't know, just actually really seeing the progress that was being made with the people where you had community members, party members knocking on doors, checking up on people,
Oh,
testing
my
people.
my sister my sister-in-law is one of them. Yeah, my sister-in-law was one of the people
Really?
in Zhejiang province. She works for the government, and she was her on the front lines, going door to door. I mean, these
Wow.
people, yeah. I mean, they
Heroes.
really, they
Heroes.
absolutely, they really came together, and
And
yeah, it's remarkable. And it
I
was
was
just this
actually, I
weird,
was
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually watching the live footage when you guys were building the hospitals in 10 days. Everybody was talking about that and how amazing that was. That should have been frontline news every day on how China's innovation and progress is surpassing everybody else. But no,
Yeah,
it wasn't.
yeah, yeah. And then there was all kinds of things like the weird thing for me was like people were saying, "Oh, there's way more numbers than they're really reporting in China. It's way worse than they're saying," which obviously wouldn't be true if now that we're having parties, we're walking around without
Yeah,
masks, we're going. That wouldn't
yeah.
be true. But
Having a
but the same
great water
people.
park party, yeah.
But the same people, when it arrived in America, they started doing the opposite thing, saying, "Oh, it's all a hoax. There's not really
Mhm.
there really aren't people in the hospitals and stuff like that." My aunt in New York, she used to live in New Jersey. She's in New York. She got
Mm.
COVID-19, and it was a
Sure.
terrible, terrible experience for her.
Wow.
And she was in the hospital for months. And then
Wow.
afterwards, there's kind of like when you're kind of recovered or you're still recovering, you go to this facility. There's some sort of like a
Mm.
military-run facility, and there were a lot of people in there. The Guyanese
Wow.
community in New York was really, really hit hard. But you know what?
Ah.
Listen, we've got a lot of other stuff we
Yes.
can talk about,
I was gonna
and
say,
I,
yeah,
we can, yeah,
agreed.
we can continue on another episode because I'm really curious about the socialism and communism stuff that you're talking about,
Sure.
because this isn't
Sure.
something I focus on too much. I don't say that communism is the right way because I don't really. I mean, I just see what China's doing. I don't care what it's called. And I just see
Sure.
what they're doing. I see how it's working, and it's working amazing. But I want to
The
get into
Deng
some of the
Xiaoping
specifics.
approach.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
that's the Deng Xiaoping approach. You don't care what the color the cat is as long as it catches mice. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So I think what I want to do to encourage some critical thinking is I want to end on one of my favorite videos, and then
nice.
we'll say our goodbyes after, about
Let's do
an
it.
amazing, amazing American man who thought critically when he was being pitted against somebody overseas in a foreign country.
Nice.
And let me pull that up here.
Go shoot my brother. Some darker people, some poor, hungry people in the mud from big, powerful America, and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. Well, I'm going to shoot them for what? How can I shoot them poor people? I'll just take me to jail.
I'm saying you're talking about me about some draft, and all of you white boys are breaking your neck to get to Switzerland and Canada and London. I'm not going to help nobody get something my Negroes don't have. If I'm going to die, I'll die now right here fighting you. If I'm going to die, you my enemy. My enemy is the white people, not Vietnams or Chinese or Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.
Yeah.
Oh, on that
Yeah.
note. On that note.
That's what we finish on here.
Beautiful.
Man, it's
Beautiful.
really, really nice talking to you. We've been going on for over 2.5 hours. And I'm
sorry
sure
if
we
I
could have
ranted a little bit.
No, this was good. We could have kept going and going. And
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to when you finally make it to China, because you got to come over to my brew pub, and when we have a beer, that's when we're going to keep going.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I'm down for that. I'm
it's
down for
gonna
that,
be-
man.
yeah,
But yeah, thanks
yeah.
for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm more than willing to see what else we can do from here. I really do want to talk about that book as well, a little bit more detail, because obviously I didn't do it in my other videos. But other than that, yeah, looking forward to continuing on this, and we'll see how it goes then.
Absolutely. And I'm going to encourage everybody on my channel to subscribe to you, Bay Area 415. I'll put the link in the description, and we will catch up next time.
All right. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks a lot, man. All right. Talk to you soon.